Was this the place in Cabo where you stayed?
Yeah, this is the golf course.
Food station?
All-inclusive golf course. I've never heard of that before.
Where do they get the water down there?
It's all desalinated.
Really?
All the hotels have their desalination.
I wonder what all those gringo condos
It's
do.
just a crazy amount of water. It's because it's desert. Of course,
They don't have it. The Colorado River's gone by the time it gets to Bob.
Well, we must look kind of silly. We must look kind of silly.
So the measure our fund balances, the link still doesn't work. Now it says not found.
Okay. If you want to get started, since you have a hard copy of that in your notebook, I'll go make copies so all of you have one of the measure our balances.
Okay.
Evidently the link's not working.
Right. Oops.
Let's double check because our website sometimes
The
doesn't.
presentation? Okay, so here's the Albany Hill stuff.
One page.
Oh, right.
What was the surf?
I think it's a little bit later than that.
See any? Anybody in the water? There's a lot
there
of
were a lot of people in the water. Cerritos Beach and also down by the South.
Yeah, there's a bunch of surf spots.
One more?
Maybe I have to refresh.
Yeah, try and refresh.
Oh, there we go. I have to refresh.
Oh.
So instead of kind of sloping
okay?
down, it was
Okay.
Check the link and see.
Yeah.
and then
Now let me refresh.
maybe 10-foot waves crashing.
Yeah, yeah, I got it. Okay, thank you.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah.
So we didn't have this the other day. Is that what you guys are trying to tell me? Because
No, the link was not, it was,
Right.
the link was to the same two attachments.
Yeah, but
okay, even when we were talking, you said something. I was like, oh yeah, okay. And I'm thinking, I don't know what she's talking about, but
There was that,
Okay.
the director's position
right,
was off.
right. Okay,
supposed to,
I got it.
because in the summer, that's where the storms come from, south.
Have it.
Well, I have a friend who wants to go
right.
in September. We'll see.
That's the rating.
Yeah, but that's
We
when all the
just
tourists are
started.
gone.
So I don't know what to do.
Well, Nicole's going to kind of walk us through
Okay,
where we're at. and
Okay,
then,
perfect.
But we'll wait for Rochelle to get back.
yeah.
Can ask Jeremy.
What are these?
I was really surprised.
They're like bridge mix.
Devastated by
They're different.
most of the resorts were closed. And then they rebounded.
Right, there's some fruit in there.
Yeah.
So it's healthy.
So it's not just, there seems to be like in Hawaii, a scene where you can rent these big-side condos from America. So you saw more big resorts.
No, it's big resorts. The timeshare district.
Maass, I got the text.
Big resorts and they're going, more hotel-like.
Well, Whole Foods.
updated version of
Fractional ownership in
bars, but it's all full.
Well,
You don't get
I went to the Whole Foods up on, was that Telegraph yesterday? And they have all these bins. And I thought, well, maybe I'll get like a little bit of like chocolate covered peanuts or something out of the bin. I didn't have anything like that. They had candy and
though.
package.
Must be cheaper to go there than.
Yeah. Okay. So I'll quickly walk you through the changes. I know that the first time the council discussed this was in January, so it's been a while. But let me try and walk you through what we've added to the document, and hopefully it'll refresh your memories in terms of what was a general consensus at the special meeting you had in January. The first change is on page 3, which is just denoting that your meeting start time of 7:30 is by resolution. I added that in case the council would like to consider changing their start time in the future. That way you know that it is by resolution. You have that authority. The next changes are on page 4, A3, special meetings. This was a clarification that Councilmember Pilch had requested regarding electronic mail for agendas. So we will certainly denote that. And then there's also the addition, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, on the 6th line there, it says by mail. I will also add email. The next change you see is the underline in A3, which discusses what you were considering in terms of special meetings and having some flexibility for dialogue in different settings depending on certain topics. Example, although it was a subcommittee, would be the recent Sanctuary Cities workshop. Matters like that. So this language aims to capture those types of situations.
I think there's a typo.
Okay?
1, 2, 3, 4. At the end of the 4th line, city manager shall coordinate though with.
Yep. Thank you. Okay, moving on, page 6. This is during the recess period. A request to add that during the recess period, should any issues arise, the city manager will communicate those to the council, which clearly already occurs. Page 7, again, just simply denoting that we deliver the agenda electronically. The next is on page 9.
Could you say that was on? Oh, okay, I see. Thank you.
And also, point taken, next time I will do track changes so it's easier to follow. My apologies. It's underlined, but it could be more clear to follow.
Well, you sent us a couple of weeks ago, you sent us track changes. So.
Okay, so page 9, this is with regards to the consent calendar. A general consensus at your meeting in January was that pulling items from the consent calendar would not necessarily be the norm. And so that's what we tried to capture in this language. The next change you'll see, which is already reflected in your current agendas, is this meeting item, which is where the council members report on regional bodies and also announce any upcoming meetings. This language simply explains what occurs during that part of the agenda.
And you get a gold star.
And then at the bottom of the change, you don't see this denoted, but Councilmember Pilch indicated a correction here under good of the city, that communication may be from the public or the council. So that would be an addition to the end of that paragraph.
Sorry, which?
Good under page 9, good of the city,
Oh,
public
okay.
forum announcements. A clarification that good of the city is also an opportunity for the council to make announcements.
Okay. I was going to point out a typo in the heading, meetings attended. There's a D missing in the middle of page 9.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
So this is our draft. Okay. Page 11. This is just following what we just discussed, restructuring that last agenda item. So it would now be other, as it already is in your agendas, other business, announcement of events, and future agenda items, removing the report on meetings attended.
Does it make sense to split them? I mean, did we discuss, I don't remember if we talked about that, whether they
So-
should,
Yeah, well, what we did after the workshop, as you'll see on your agenda this evening, is we have the reports on meeting attended, an announcement of future meetings, right after the consent calendar. And then at the end of the meeting, it's more or less future agenda items and any other lingering announcements.
Do you want to
But
see a
that's-
printed agenda to see?
no, I'm just wondering if it makes sense to break them up this way. Because, for example, when we're reporting on a particular meeting that we've attended, you know, it's logical to say, and if anybody's interested, there is another such meeting coming up next month on such and such a date, and the public is welcome to attend. I don't know, it just seems like
So
the,
number 5 reads now, right after the consent, council members' reports and regional, local meetings attended and announcement of future meetings. So that's the title of the agenda item at the beginning of the meeting now.
yeah,
And then at the end, it's just other business, announcement of future.
of
events.
events / future
So
agenda
it's
items.
a kind of a catch-all at the end of the agenda as well, whereas if it's something that you're reporting on based on your assignment to the regional bodies, it would fall at the beginning.
It seems like the one at the end would be sort of if, like the senior center had say they had a pancake breakfast, that would sort of go there rather than in the beginning. But I just want to say one thing, and I think it's because I don't understand. Since council has the opportunity to talk about the meetings and to talk about future kind of citywide events, what would we talk about during good of the city? I mean, why was that added in? I just don't understand the thinking behind it.
My request to add in council, well, so previously, and I thought it was a good idea, previous councils that I've watched, council members had an opportunity during good of the city to say whatever. Usually it was an announcement of some significant event or something, or an event that had happened and it was successful, something like that. It's not necessarily a regional, local event. And I thought that that was a good idea. Now, if we want to not do this, that we can talk about it, but not allowing, I guess, we can talk about rules and procedures, but I don't think we can bar council members from speaking their minds during good of the city, since it is an open forum.
If we, let's say one of us goes to an event and we bring it up during good of the city, then we're restricted from even saying, well, how was it? Or, we can't ask questions about it, right? It's good of the city, we can't respond to something. I mean, I'm wondering if it would make more sense to bring that up during the part of the meeting where we can actually.
But that's what I was thinking.
So I'm thinking things like, so examples would be, oh, I went to the July 4th event, it was great, good job on the part of city staff. Or don't forget that the Albany Film Festival is coming up, that sort of thing. And now the advantage of doing things at the beginning of the meeting is that people will actually hear them. If anything that's said at the very last part of the meeting, no one will hear because no one will be here and no one will be listening. So that's one of my issues. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I get that part of it, but I'm just wondering whether we should somehow incorporate it into the meetings attended part or something, something where we can say, we can respond.
Well, respond. I don't. Well, the response part aside, I mean, I would love to have those sort of announcements up at the beginning of the meeting if we want to call it out that way, sure.
Well, could we change it to, report on meetings/events attended and announcements on upcoming meetings/events?
Sounds great to me,
Yeah,
if that's
that would make
okay.
more sense.
And that's ahead of good of the city.
That's fine. And then the only thing that would be left then for number 11 is future agenda items.
New business or other business and future agenda items. That makes sense to me.
Yeah, and I think that should go at the end, because sometimes something will come up during the meeting or during good of the city when people advocate for something, and then you think, okay, we can't talk about it, but let's say at the end, let's agendize, flying to the moon or whatever.
Right, and that's how all the advisory body agendas are organized, following the council's. Okay, moving on.
Sounds good.
Okay. The next is on page 13, just a very simple clarification that the agendas are also posted to our website, as well as any correspondence received regarding the agenda items.
So does that then make the posting on the website a legal posting place, or are they still?
It is a legal posting place,
Okay.
as is, yes. Okay, now we're going to move all the way to the back of the document, page 28. The reorganization policy. You may want to take a minute to look at this. Basically, it's the nomination process as discussed in January. So the mayor would poll the council members to make nominations for mayor. The council will vote on the nominations in reverse order that the nominations were made, with the last nomination made voted on first. The nomination process will be repeated for the selection of a council member to serve as vice mayor. And the last change is to M5, which was, again, something discussed in January, which may need to be discussed again, is aiming to put some guidelines or parameters or consideration around how and when and if council members attend advisory body meetings.
And I just had a comment about that one, that I have no issue with any of it, except that the last sentence seems to indicate that mere attendance at committee, boards, and commission meetings should be limited. But I don't know that that was our direction, and I don't know that I think that that's wise to say. If someone wants to just listen, go and listen. If there's some difficult, important issue going on and it's going through multiple meetings of an advisory body, it might be helpful to be there and listen. But I am interested in what the council has to say.
Well, yeah, I mean, I think if one of us really feels compelled to go to a particular meeting, we should go, but we do have an influence, being on council, and I've always
CMAC and you're the only
seen it, but, someone says, oh, Councilmember Maass is out there, it's like, I'm not there to spy on them, I'm just there to sort of gather information, and I just don't want to be the elephant in the room. I mean, I would say there's one thing about, we're broadcasting more and more of the important meetings, and I guess they're mostly archived and available to see, so just for information gathering, we can kind of go online and watch meetings.
Yeah. Well, in that case, I don't see any difference between that and actually being physically present if someone knows that you might be watching. I mean, I've had the opposite experience at several commission committee meetings where I was told that, oh, we are so glad you came because we never have a council member at our meetings. And they welcomed my presence. So I think that, you know, I don't know where, I don't think drawing the line in terms of actual, just being at the meeting without speaking is, I'm not sure that that's the right place to draw
I mean,
the line.
that's the other side of it, and I think that's a good point.
Yeah.
That it shows that we do support what they're doing, and they're not kind of isolated. Also, you know, yeah, go ahead. Well, I mean, there's also the, I'm sure sometimes they feel that whatever they do, you know, then goes via staff, a couple of staff positions, and then comes back to the council, and maybe it's not getting the full disclosure that, what their intention was. But, you know, I don't know.
Well, you can always talk to your appointee, or you can talk to anybody not your appointee. I think it's a little intimidating for people to have a council there in some ways, a council member there. I don't know.
Well, we might have to agree to disagree on this one because I just don't see the issue here. But I can assure you with my current schedule, my attendance will be very limited at committee and commission meetings. So it's not, practically it's not going to be a worry. But I'd prefer not to see that sentence there. It's not a big deal.
Well, it says limited. It doesn't say you can't go.
Right.
So I think it's broad enough that we can leave it in there, but it does kind of give the idea that you're on the council, you're not on the Park and Rec Commission.
Right. But the difference is participation versus not participation. Being there and listening is very different than participating. Anyway, we can move on. It sounds like we don't have an agreement on this.
I can live with it either way. I kind of like having it in just to communicate to them that the fact that we're not coming to their meetings doesn't mean we're not paying close attention to what they're doing. You know.
One way to look at it, sure.
And then the last thing that I wanted to mention, actually two things. Item Q, council member emergency substitutes, is something that the city hasn't done to date, but is encouraged. And if the council continues to be interested in moving forward with this, we'll have a separate agenda item in the coming months when it works in your schedule to adopt a resolution identifying your 1, 2, and 3 emergency substitutes. And this is in the case of an emergency where you are physically unable to serve as a council member.
Yeah, I sort of get the point of it, but perhaps we should define emergency. You know, it's an emergency because my kid needs to be picked up at her soccer game.
No.
You know,
Sure.
So,
Right.
you know, some kind of,
Does it say in the code?
Yeah, there's government code language surrounding this.
Yeah, basically, the council would need to declare an emergency, and you're talking about something other than a personal situation. It'd be, you know, fire, flood, earthquake,
Act of God.
hurricanes, whatever kind of weather we have coming at us in the future.
Is that really the emergency being referred to here? Because it talks about individual council members being unable to attend meetings. So it seems like that might be a slightly different definition. I mean, I was guessing that it was incapacitation. You know, you were physically unable to perform your duties, something like that, or mental incapacitation.
Yeah, I mean, when
Well,
I've
he'll
seen
say,
this
okay.
used, it's been more in the context of a declaration of emergency, because there isn't really authorization in state law to have alternates. If you just can't make a meeting, have somebody go vote for you. It's got to be some broader situation that compels the substitution of somebody. So maybe what we should do, I could put my head together with Nicole and check the state statute and make sure we're fitting in the correct slot here.
So I'm just trying to get my head around it. So an emergency might be that all transportation is down, you know, and you council member actually can't get to the meeting, something like that, or that would be the sort of emergency you're thinking of, or
Yeah, environmental issue with explosion at a refinery, toxic waste.
Someone comes in and
Release.
kills us all,
Well,
and we need a city council meeting, and we're all dead. Then you
well, armed insurrection, yeah, I mean, there are a number of things that could lead to that situation, but they're extreme events, not an inconvenience.
The dedicated survivor scenario, I don't know, anyone's, my wife's totally into this program. The initial episode, somebody blows up the entire Congress.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Kiefer Sutherland's the president now.
So but we can bring this back to you with more substance, so it's clearly defined.
Mayor, I had one other thing.
Okay, go ahead, I have one too, so.
Oh, okay.
Go ahead.
So I was going to make another plea for a city manager's report as part of the agenda. I don't think it has to be long or even that formal, but I think it would be a great way for both the council and the public to be informed of the progress of certain projects in the city. And this is done by other councils, and this is even done in some of our committees and commissions. So I'd love to hear what my other council members think about that.
It doesn't sound like a bad idea. I mean, how much reporting would we get? I mean, that would be the question, how in-depth would you go, or?
I suspect they'd be of the nature of when I send you email updates, like Pierce Street Park is getting, built today or whatever. Those types of messages. I mean, Nicole and I have talked about this a few times since Nick brought it up again, and I think that if it's anything of substance, I'm going to write a staff report on it so we can talk about it. It wouldn't be anything that we could have a going back and forth for, so it would be almost like a city manager's announcement. We did a little checking around, and a lot of cities do use it. There's no attachments to it, however, because if I'm going to have an attachment, it's going to be in the form of a staff report, and you're going to get the full details anyway. So they would be more of an opportunity for city manager announcements.
But, I'm wondering, when we have that part where we're talking about upcoming meetings, maybe this would be sort of the equivalent of upcoming, when will the Public Works building be open? When will the work on Cornices Creek be
Sure.
finished?
Yeah, I was thinking that too, maybe just tuck it into that section. Is that what you're thinking, where
Yeah,
reports, council member reports, and then maybe city manager report? And if there's anything,
Yep, you can put it, wherever.
Somehow it strikes me that it might be better to pull it out as a separate item. I don't know, just for, I don't know
well,
why.
we're sort of talking about issues that are not on the agenda, that we're not going to get a more specific update on, but something that,
Right, it has to be informational only. It can't
Yeah.
be, we can't discuss it, but, right, just informational. I think usually it's pulled out as a separate item when the staff speaks versus when the council speaks. I think that's cleaner, but I guess I'm fine either way as long as we do it.
Update reports. I guess the question for me is, you can update us briefly either via email or here in the council. So the issue is whether it's of value to the public to do it in the council meeting. If it's really not of value to the public, then just send us an email. And I think this sounds like something that's more for our own edification. If we don't really expect the public to either want or be able to react to an item, I don't really think we should be doing it in a meeting.
Well, I have to disagree with that because in my work with the citizens in the town, it always comes up that they're underinformed. They're chronically underinformed about what's going on. So, the more they can, and they don't know where to turn. They're always asking me, well, what news source should I look to? So, another source of information I think would be absolutely welcome, and any information about what's going on in the city is, in my mind, of interest to the public.
well, I think though that's what the e-news does on a weekly basis, and has a potential of much more information because you can just link to the whole story. I'm not sure like Michael says, I mean, who are we addressing this to? If it's the public, I think then e-news does that. If it's us, I like the update email that we get, because it'll be able to have a little bit more substance. And then if I have a question, I can email you back. In this kind of a format, I can still email you, but I'd have to remember and go home and
The
odds
e-news,
aren't good.
yeah, the e-news reaches very, very few of our citizens.
And you think they're hearing us on here?
That will reach a few more citizens who are not on e-news. So I'm just
Oh,
thinking
sure.
that the more dissemination of information, always better. And one possibility is a written report that could be an attachment, but doing it in an informal way allows the city manager to maybe not have to do as much preparation and spend as much time with it, and you know, and also update us on maybe something that's just very recently happened as well. I mean, this is not that unusual a thing, as both staff and I have said. Other cities, plenty of other cities do it.
Well, how about if we keep it on a trial basis rather informally, and if there's something coming up that you feel like the Pier Street Park, you know, like even just the fact that they've started working is important. Things like that people really are interested in, as opposed to kind of the more mundane things that we're interested in, but, you know, I don't know that the general public's all that interested in. And so maybe without making it onerous on you, if between the council meetings, Pier Street Park starts to get built, you can say that. So it's
Yeah, and
quick.
most
I
of the
don't want a
cities,
lot of-
yeah, most of the cities we checked in, there really aren't any attachments. It really
Yeah.
is just a verbal, this is what's going on kind of thing.
And I don't want to make
But
it
that's also why
onerous
we
for you.
added the calendar at the end of the meeting as well, to let people know of upcoming, not just commission and committee meetings, but, you know, other things. But if it's a good tool to inform more people, you know, I'm happy to do the pleasure of the council.
So once a month, we get a executive director's report from Art Dow at County Transportation Commission. I don't think we need to go this far.
Right.
But, well, we do. You can always print out the e-news if you want. I mean, it's a PDF, right? What do I think? I think if people really want news, if you're an uninformed citizen and you want news and you want it accessible, it should be on the website instead of trying to remember when the council meeting is and to watch it or find the agenda, which takes a little digging, but it should be on the website as well. There's a lack of clarity here, I think, or maybe differences of opinion about what council meetings are for. I don't see council meetings really being about one-way communication one way or another. They're about interacting. There's a chance where the public and the council can interact. And I think we ought to try to stick to that as much as possible.
Just curious, Mayor, what would be an example of information that would be mundane sort that only the council would know and that the public wouldn't, or would want to know and the public wouldn't?
It could be where we are on a project, like perhaps sewers, you know, I mean, the sewer project itself is agendized, discussed, whatever, but to say, you know, we're actually going to start this project, or we're halfway through the project, or whatever, maybe that's of interest. I'm just not sure we're going to reach any more people, and we're burdening the city manager to do this, is my concern. Is the cost benefit?
Well, actually, I was hoping to maybe even unburden the city manager, because she's already doing it. So she does an informal report and doesn't have to write something up for us and send an email. This, you know, I don't want to speak for Penelope, but it could be a way to do it more easily. I personally, that's one reason why you hear my reports of meetings attended verbally, is because I just don't have the time to write up the report. I wish I did, but.
Here's what I'm going to suggest. I think that this is very much a management style question. It's really what I think that we would look in the first instance to Penelope to tell us what seems like the best way to go to her. this is the first that I've heard this idea, and I'd like to give it more thought. And mostly I'd like to hear Penelope's perspective on it. What, if there are additional reports that you'd like to make, and, you know, what you think is the best before we start telling you what we think is best.
Honestly, I don't have a super strong opinion about it one way or the other. I was going to let you guys help make that decision. I agree with the mayor in that I would want to make it substantive. So if we find that, you know, 5 out of our 6 meetings, I'm raising my hand, I'm just going, oh, nothing to report. If that happens, and it will happen, it just kind of, it's a little awkward. So I think I'd probably always make sure I had something to say, whether it was meaningful or not. But, you know, there are some mundane things like, oh, we just put our sewer project out to bid. Well, it's mundane, but it's $3.2 million, you know, so maybe it's not mundane, you know, those kind of things. So just re-announcing bid projects, letting people know when construction's starting. We have enough of those types of things going on. Maybe Park and Rec, instead of just having, you know, it on the agenda that they're having a meeting, you know, the second Tuesday of the month, maybe they're talking about some of the concept plans that we're talking about tonight, you know. So I think that in just taking the time to dive into what other commissions and committees are doing, looking what's on our website in terms of bid and construction and different things like that, I could pick some highlights of those and certainly just make announcements.
How about those color schemes for the new furniture in the Public Works Center?
Yes.
We could try it and see how
Yeah,
it
let's
goes.
do.
You
That's
certainly
fine.
could come back and say, you know, this is making me crazy, or,
Yeah, let's give it a 6-month try and see how we like it, and that's fine with me, but thank you for asking. Yeah.
And I have to disagree with Councilmember Nason that I think it's, you know, the agenda is our show to put together as we want, and, you know, that while we certainly always want to take the staff's interests and opinions into consideration, you know, I think we get to decide whether we want to do this or not. I'm not hearing strong support for it, but what I am hearing is possibly allowing what I've maybe heard consensus is about is allowing the city manager to speak during the announcements part at the beginning, whatever we're calling that thing now, meetings attended, announcements part, if there's something to speak about. So did I get the right idea of the consensus?
I think so.
Okay.
And we'll try it and see how it goes.
Yeah, sounds
Sure,
good.
I'd be happy to.
Okay, I have one more that I'd like to add. On page 8, where it has the order of the agenda, I'd like to pull out proclamations and well, let me start again, see if I can make it make a little more sense. To have proclamations come before the consent calendar, so that, especially when we have people that are in the audience that are receiving the proclamation, they can get their proclamation, do their little photo op, and they can leave, and they can stay if they want, but they're free to go, and they don't have to sit through what sometimes is a long consent period, or maybe there's presentations tucked in there, and they're here for a really long time. Just, it seems like it would be sort of a kindness to them. And that part doesn't take so long, that staff that's here for consent, or if we have consultants here for some reason, they're not waiting a whole lot longer, but it does get the proclamee, maybe, out.
Sure, we
Totally
actually have
agree.
some decent examples of that locally. The City of Berkeley, right after their roll call, they have something called ceremonial matters. And so that's kind of all encompassing. If you wanted to present, sometimes you present an award or a certificate of
Right.
appreciation, so that could also fall here, and/or the proclamations. That would be a simple fix.
Yeah, I think that would make sense. And maybe
Yep.
we have the Civics Academy graduation coming up. That could be a time.
Right. And the disaster service workers occurs periodically. That'd be nice for them as well.
Yeah. Okay, so what's it called? Ceremonial?
Ceremonial matters. But then under that, we would denote each item, so you're very clear on what the proclamation is for.
Right,
still.
right.
Yeah.
And then in a case like tonight where we have 3 and we're not giving them to anybody, they could just go on consent
Sure.
as they do
Yeah.
now.
Yeah, and that's just for the essence of time.
Right.
and consideration for everyone attending, yeah.
Okay.
Any other changes you'd like to see?
I don't think so.
Well, we'll put this in final draft and bring it back on a near council agenda in the future.
Oh, I had one other small item. I find it a little bit unnecessarily formal that we do the roll call, where someone else asks us if we're here and then we respond whether we're here or not. I think the mayor can see whether we're here or not and just make that call. That's what other cities do. They just say, you know, the mayor says, I note, or the presiding officer says, I note that all members are in attendance. It seemed like unnecessarily formal, but, you know, it's not something I'm going to fight over.
I don't know, I think, you know, it's being recorded, it's being, I don't know, I would leave it, but
There may be other cities that do something less formal than that, but most of the meetings I go to, they actually always go through a roll call thing, so, I mean, it's true, we're a small group,
Yeah.
so it's hard,
Yeah,
it's
certainly with
easy
a
to
large,
see if somebody's missing.
with a larger number of members, that becomes almost
Yeah.
a necessity, but when there's just 5 of us, but, you know, not a biggie.
Looks like you have 7 minutes to take a break, and we'll start fresh.
Good evening. I'd like to call to order the Albany City Council meeting for May 1st, 2017. Councilmember Nason will lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. I'll take a roll call vote. Councilmember Barnes?
Here.
Councilmember Maass?
Here.
Councilmember Nason?
Here.
Vice Mayor Pilch?
Present.
And I am also here. Council report on action taken in closed session. Council gave staff direction on how to proceed on the closed session item. Consent calendar. Items on the consent calendar are considered to be routine by the City Council and will be enacted by one motion. By approval of the consent calendar, the staff recommendations will be adopted unless otherwise modified by the City Council. There will be no separate discussion on these items unless a council member or member of the audience requests removal of the items from the consent calendar. Do any council members wish to pull an item?
Yes, 4-1.
4-1.
I've got a question about 4-4.
Okay, 4-4. Any others? And does any member of the public wish to pull an item? Okay.
Councilmember Maass, did you say 4-4?
4-4, yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, 4-1. Vice Mayor Pilch, do you have a question?
Yeah, so that, I believe that's the minutes. In the minutes, sorry, I lost track. Oh, here they are. When we discussed the direction to staff regarding the Bay Area Air Quality Management District Rule 1216, I believe we did, it's not mentioned in the minutes, but I just wanted to clarify that I believe we gave staff direction to proceed with a letter supporting both 1216 and 13.1. So correct me if I'm not right about that, because it doesn't specifically call that out in the minutes.
But mentioned it in a little more general terms in the next statement. Sorry, I'm not finding it very quickly.
Yeah, I just searched.
Of the city public hearing, something that
Well, it says the council directed staff to return this item to the council on the consent calendar. So that's pretty
and
general.
keep reading. There was council directed staff to discussion. Okay.
Oh,
Okay.
it does say, okay, so
Yeah.
I see something that says broaden support beyond Rule 1216 in the letter.
Right,
Okay.
yes.
Okay. All right, thank you.
Okay.
All right.
Does that suffice?
That'll be
Okay.
fine.
Okay,
4-4.
4-4.
Yeah, I guess the question is, this is a 6-month resolution to hire, I think it's Coast Engineering to do it. So do we think we may find someone to fill the position in that 6 months, or are we just going to do it 6 months to 6 months? Will you just come back every 6 months to continue on?
No, we hope to have a permanent solution. It's a competitive environment out there to find experienced building inspectors right now. And so this is an interim solution. It's a good period of time for us to try to do another recruitment. Usually by the time you do it and hire someone, it takes 5 or 6 months to get them here.
Would it make any sense to look to an adjoining city, say Berkeley, and, you know, if this is going to be an ongoing problem, come up with some kind of mutual aid agreement, for lack of a better term?
We need a full-timer.
Yeah, I think they would probably certainly reach out to them, but my guess is, for example, I know City of Berkeley just did a recruitment, just hired someone in the last few weeks, City of Emeryville as well. So they're in the same position that we're in, and we're
Okay.
competing against them in a sense right now for
And
for
is this,
inspectors.
we used a company 10 years ago, or weren't we using somebody, or we had contracted out these services some years ago?
There are now 3 or 4 different firms that we have contracts with. Phillips Seabrook and Associates is the firm that we've used for several decades, probably. They haven't had a staff person that they can give us, so we reached out to other firms.
I remember at some point 10, 12 years ago, working with an inspector who was coming from Santa Rosa, so I wondered
Yes,
if
that would have
this-
been Phillips Seabrook's.
Yeah.
Seabrook.
Okay,
Yeah. It's
Thanks.
a tough position to fill these days.
yeah, okay. Thank you.
Okay, could I get a motion to approve the consent calendar?
So moved.
In a second?
Second,
Poll the council, please.
Yes.
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 Yes, and the motion carries. Okay, council member reports on meetings attended. Councilmember Maass, do you want to add to your report? Or
Well, I submitted a report on meetings that I think, mentioned the last council meeting. One of the issues about the timeline between when I attend these meetings and have to submit a report, it's usually there's a crossover. So since that last report, I attended the County Transportation Commission and the Waste Management Board. I'll write up something about those meetings. I think the most interesting thing that came out of either one of those meetings was actually a discussion afterwards on the County Transportation Commission. We recently were unable to get the amount of funds that we wanted to do some some street crossing improvements on Buchanan and San Pablo. And talking to Art Dow, their issue was that we didn't have enough grant funding for them to be able to supplement it to give us enough money to get the whole thing done. His thing was that Albany is at a competitive disadvantage because we're so small in terms of going out and getting grant money. His proposal is that in the next 2 or 3 months, is what he told me, is that he wants to get Albany, Emeryville, and Piedmont together to talk about a way that they can go in together to get grant funding, which I thought was an interesting idea. So I'll write this up in time for the next council meeting.
Any other reports or comments from council?
Just that Bike to Work Day is coming up on Thursday, May 11th.
Yeah.
And we are hosting the Mayor's Conference next Wednesday, May 10th. It'll be across the street at Sumo Sushi, and all of you council members are welcome to attend. Okay, moving on to the presentation, review of advisory body work plans. Maybe we have a staff report?
Yes, we have SEJC this evening and also CMAC. We have Jack Kenny from CMAC, if you'd like to go first.
Good evening, Mayor McQuaid, council members. Jack Kinney, I'm the chair of the CMAC, Community Media Access Committee. And I believe you have our report and the work plan in front of you. But I just wanted to point out that I think the title of our committee really sums up what we do. The purpose is to advise the council regarding the public access channel in Albany, KALB. And so the media is really film and video and online content that's generated by citizens and by the city. And so that's one of our purposes, is to advise regarding generating content for the channel. The other is community, which is involving the community, involving the citizens of Albany in their government, and also in contributing to the channel itself by creating content and receiving artistic information, artistic content such as is produced by the channel, and also through means such as the Film Fest. And finally, access. It's our job to find ways to provide access for the community so that they can be part of the channel. They can generate content that can be put on the channel. They can get training and decide if they want to become the filmmakers of the future. And they can also volunteer for the channel. So it's giving community members a chance to be part of making content for the Albany residents. So as far as generating content, what's happened recently, I'll just point out a couple of things. You know, the Albany Film Fest, we just had our 7th annual Film Fest, and very successful. We had record attendance this year, and I think it was well received by both the audience and the filmmakers who attended, who came from all over the country, as well as locally. And one of the ways that has been possible is that we have moved the site of the Film Fest to the Albany Twin Theater on Solano. And that happened in 2015. And we also created a new portion of the Film Fest, which was the Albany Filmmakers Showcase. So outside of the films that are submitted for competition, we now have a new category of Albany filmmakers. So anyone who lives in Albany, formerly lived in Albany, can submit a film, and there's no charge, no submission fee. And we show those the last part of the Film Fest, and it's become a very popular feature of the Film Fest. So the second part of what CMAC does is overseeing and giving advice to staff regarding things that are put on the channel. And as you know, cable casting of city council meetings is one of the first things that was done, that was recommended to the city and the staff. And luckily we have Jeremy Allen, who does a great job of overseeing the station and all the related infrastructure with that. And you can see on the list all the things that he's been involved with. He keeps us informed of all the things that he's working on. And we have added more meetings that are being televised on the cable channel now. And so that's adding more access for the community to understand what's happening in all their political bodies. There are other times when we have showings in connection with the library. So if we have shows like of the Albany Film Fest, after it's concluded, we always have a best of the Albany Film Fest because we have the award winners. So we show that at the community center. Next one's coming up May 23rd, if you want to mark your calendar for that. And we also provide access by providing training. And one of the themes that we've had with the Albany Film Fest, not only generating content, but also providing a way for the youth of the area to get training. So if we have proceeds that come out of the Film Fest, we're dedicating those to having classes, hands-on training for our local youth so that they can actually make more content and be the new filmmakers for the future in Albany. So as far as our initiatives for the coming 2 years, the first is we want to keep the film festival sustainable because that is how we have generated a lot of enthusiasm in the community and a lot of interest. I think we had more people submitting films from Albany this year than ever before. So it's created, I think, a buzz about having this event that people can attend and they can also participate in. And so we really have to thank the city council for all your support of the Film Fest because that's made it possible to keep going and make it bigger every year. As you know, this year we had not just one day, but a whole week. So thanks for your support and also some great sponsors like Solano Avenue Association and Albany Community Foundation who have been there from the beginning. So one thing we're looking forward to as far as the future of the Film Fest is reaching out to other local film festivals, and we've started doing that already, and we're getting ideas from them and sharing information, and I think it'll be good collaboration in the future for finding ways that we can engage the community and provide some good entertainment for folks. We also have some initial dealings with the Pacific Film Archive. I think Councilmember Barnes, you asked about that a couple of years ago, if we were looking into that. And so we have made some overtures and we have some connection with them on that. As far as the next initiative is, we have a programming subcommittee, and we are looking into having some Albany content generated by our own staff and volunteers. We had a pilot program that Councilmember Maass was in, which was Albanians getting coffee on bikes. So we're hoping to expand that program, get other Albanians talking about Albany and themselves as a regular program. We also started a thing called the Albany Soapbox, and that's a chance for anyone from Albany to have 1 minute of camera time, and they can talk about anything they want. And we set this up at different events, such as the Art and Green Festival and the 4th of July celebration. So we're continuing that series. It's another form of access. And then we have a pop-up studio where we can put together a program. And so we have ways that we can use the volunteers that we have, plus the equipment that the city owns, to generate some on-the-spot programs, depending on what the particular issue might be, or if there's an idea about a particular topic that needs to be explored. And then finally, our other initiative is to look for ways to update our guidelines for submission of content to KALB. So if someone has a great video that they made and they want to put it on the air, we need to formalize our guidelines a little more. They're a little bit out of date, but that's basically what we're looking forward to in the next couple of years. So if there's any questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
Are there any questions from council?
Yeah, a couple I wondered about. Well, first off, are proceeds actually coming out of the film festival now? Is it actually generating some excess?
We don't have the final accounting on all this, but we had, our ticket sales were about 25% greater than previous. So our expenses went up too. So we haven't had the final accounting to know, but I think we may have actually made a little money this year.
Well, it was a wonderful event, even if it doesn't generate money, but I'm so glad it happens. It really is fun. One thing that I wondered about, the Media Access Committee. Media is now expanded into meaning things other than just film or radio or TV. I mean, there's all these things that I barely know anything about, but a Facebook, a Twitter, an Instagram, or a dozen other social media platforms. Have you ever guys ever talked about that, or how you might have some kind of impact on those platforms?
Well, we use those platforms for promoting different events and the Film Fest and other things, but we haven't had it as a discussion topic for the committee. That's probably something that we should include.
I would add, however, that each of the departments has a Facebook page, or we also use Twitter and different types of social media, and YouTube, of course, where we put tons of our things on there. And the city also already has an adopted social media policy.
Okay.
We do, if I can just respond, is that I didn't mention that we now have our own dedicated YouTube channel. The city does. So a lot of the content, like these council meetings, are on the YouTube channel, and also other programs that we tape, or shouldn't say tape, that we record, because there's no tape anymore. Like the Brown Bag Speaker Series, the Poetry Nights, those go on the YouTube channel also.
Okay.
And, and I've got to say that the YouTube channel is a great thing because you can subscribe and get notifications that new things have come up. So that's a benefit to using that. I was glad to see you did that. And I actually get to slip in another announcement, which was I went to the event last night, which is Albany Loves Oakland, to benefit the Oakland Youth Chorus. And it's just wonderful that you're able to put on an event like that as well. The Film Fest keeps giving. It's great.
other questions? Is there any public comment on this item? Please come up.
Actually, a question for Jack. About this online video submission, I was just curious, so if someone had a video they wanted to submit, like, what would the timeline be to actually get it up, in just a general estimate?
Well, assuming it meets all the criteria in the guidelines, it's probably a couple of week turnaround. Yeah.
Thank you. Are there any other comments from council? I just have one. Looking at your report, I really appreciated how you had the chart with the pros and cons and notes. I thought that was really helpful, so thank you.
Okay, good.
Vice Mayor Pills, did you have a quick comment?
Just that these guys are doing a great job, and we should let them do whatever the heck they want.
Thank you.
Are there any other comments? Then I would accept a motion to approve the CMAC work plan.
I so move.
Second.
Yes.
Yes.
Councilmember Nason,
Yes.
Vice Mayor Pilch,
Yes.
Mayor McQuay.
Yes, and the motion carries.
Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
And next up, we have Bart Grossman from SEJC.
Good evening, council members. Nice to see you all. I'm Bart Grossman, Chair of Social and Economic Justice Commission and a long-term Albany resident. The other members of the commission are Tara Baer, Brian Beal, Kathy Deal, our Vice Chair, and Margie Marks. And I'm pleased to present our 2-year work plan, which I believe you have in front of you. You may remember that not long ago, Council considered dropping the SEJC, but you gave the Commission an opportunity to move forward and to meet monthly with the support of our outstanding Human Services Manager, Bldg. And I hope you feel the Commission has justified your support. In the last work period, among other things, we did the basic analysis for the soda tax. We researched and made recommendations to the Council on a rent review program. We provided Council with a report on minimum wage activities in the Bay Area. And we developed a proposal for a pilot program for a community resource center. Some items on our new work plan represent follow-up on previous actions and some new work stemming from your strategic plan. And you'll see that we've organized our work plan in accord with the strategic plan, though I may diverge a little in presenting just for efficiency. So under your first strategic goal, foster a healthy, sustainable urban village, regarding housing availability, we view the current affordable housing crisis in the Bay Area as one of the most important issues of economic justice that we face. We will continue to monitor the operation and outcome of Project HOPE, our homeless case management program. Community Development Director Jeff Bond has agreed to meet with us annually to review progress on the Albany housing element, and this may lead to some further recommendations down the road. And we will review the draft rent review ordinance when it is available and continue to monitor progress on that action. And with regard to health and wellness, you've asked us to provide recommendations on health and wellness programs to be developed with the soda tax revenue, and we will gladly work with the community to do that. On strategic goal 2, engaging our diverse community. With regard to outreach and services to low-income residents, seniors, and people experiencing homelessness, we are working with Isabel on outreach to low-income residents and seniors regarding available low-income tax measure exemptions, and we'll be recommending options for exemptions in future tax measures and franchise agreements. We also intend to investigate service gaps for seniors who wish to remain in their homes and age in place in Albany. We want to see what they need and what we can do to provide services. We'll be working with Isabel and with the new center director to implement and evaluate the O'Curry Resource Center pilot. And with regard to the center, as you know, due to a work commitment, I was unable to be here when this proposal was presented to the council, and I wanted to thank you personally for agreeing to give us the support to try this exciting new effort. We hope and believe we will be able to fill the center director position quickly. We've applied for supplemental funding via the Mental Health Services Act. We've also discussed with Berkeley Mental Health the possibility of outposting a mental health worker at the center, at least on one of the days that it's open. And to date, we're encouraged by the response we've gotten from Berkeley Mental Health. We think both of those things will come to pass. There's obviously a great deal to do to get the center up and running. The center leadership is going to need to do extensive outreach to all groups in the community to learn about their needs and their desires for the center and to invite their participation. We'll be in contact with a great many organizations to which referrals can be made, and we'll be collecting information and eventually creating a database of resources for our local residents. We'll be meeting with stakeholders in the community, including police, neighbors, the schools, the community of the United Methodist Church that has graciously agreed to house the center in this pilot year, groups of interested residents and potential consumers. We'll be training volunteer greeters and devising means to record data about the kinds of needs that are uncovered, to follow up on referrals, to track outcomes of the work. And when we've got all that figured out, the center will open for business, hopefully in August. So we'll be up and running. I believe that the O'Curry Center has the potential not only to be a source of help to many in the Albany community, but also a major resource for identifying and working to address needs and service gaps in our community that may not be visible to us at this point. I think it will become a place where some individual and group needs will become visible and can be addressed. Finally, under the objective of promoting community inclusivity, we intend to identify strategies and programs to support inclusivity by reaching out to under-recognized and underserved communities representing diversity of race, ethnicity, religion, residency status, gender identity, and also to elders and to youth in the community. We have a number of ideas about how to proceed with this, but I'm hoping that perhaps this evening or at other times you may share with us some of your thoughts about what you hope will come out of our addressing this area and what kinds of programs and needs you see us addressing in this work. And thank you very much. That's what I have to say. Do you have any questions?
Thank you. Are there any questions from council?
A comment. I just want to say I really appreciate the work that you guys have gotten into in some of these issues and the amount of due diligence you've done on following this up. I think it's really important for Albany. You're doing some heavy lifting on some things that the council could be doing, I suppose, if we had time to do everything, but I'm glad there's a committee set up to be doing this. This was a real off-the-base one, and there's probably one more thing that you don't really need to add, but I'm wondering if there's ever been any thought about legislative review, that from time to time you could look at what's going on in Sacramento, per se, and how some of those things are affecting, social issues in Albany.
We haven't done that to date, but certainly that's something we could do.
It might be worth it. I mean, I know we do it to some degree here, but and we do it on some of the other commissions and committees that we're involved with on a regional level, but Albany doesn't necessarily do it, and sometimes these things will have big impacts on what's going on in Albany.
There are a number of major pieces of legislation that are making their way through the state legislature at this point. That will have impacts, certainly.
Okay. Anyway, that's my comments for the,
Okay, are there any public comments on this item?
Okay.
Hi, I'm Francesco Papalia, and I'm speaking on behalf of the Albany Property Rights Advocates. And we have concern that the Social and Economic Justice Commission would be reviewing the rent review program. In particular, on December 5th, when the council was meeting and discussing this issue, at least 3 of the commissioners, Deal, Marks, and Beal, spoke at the meeting, and I just got up and I was discussing, gee, was this okay with the Brown Act? And I was informed by both the people on the committee and with the council that it wasn't, because this issue had been taken away from them and it was before the council. And so they were basically let loose to speak however they wanted in whatever kind of settings that they felt like it, because they were not going to be on this issue. Now we're here 6 months later. There's been meetings before then and after then that where this issue has come up, where they've spoken on it individually at meetings. And I just don't see how, at this point, despite the fact that it may be the best venue, as far as in your mind that it might be, because it's an appropriate venue, I don't believe, I mean, unless they can vouch that they've never spoken to each other about it over the last 6 months, nor emails. And I just don't think that that's believable. I mean, because they basically were given permission to speak freely because it was not going to be on their agenda. So I'd like to have you address this and actually have the city attorney address it, because this is an important Brown Act issue. And otherwise, I think that there's another issue that I think will need to come up, but I'll talk to that at a different time. Thank you.
Thank you.
Oh, sorry.
My name is Elaine Selton. I'm speaking for myself tonight. I have a concern similar to Francesco's, and I'm speaking with regard to a meeting that was July 21st. It was a social and economic justice meeting, and Mr. Grossman said, if you watch it on YouTube, it's 44 minutes and 45 seconds in, that's where you'll find it. He said, I have some comments on the draft, but perhaps they would be best be done through email. Again, I'm not an expert, but it seems to me that that may be a violation, so maybe the city attorney could look at that. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Are there any other public comments? Craig, would you care to comment? Sorry.
Actually, no, I'm pretty reluctant to comment without having all the facts. I mean, if this is something council's concerned about, I'd be happy to gather information and do some analysis and report back to you. But I don't want to give an off-the-cuff answer that might be based on incorrect factual assumptions.
Okay. Is it the sense of the council, at least pertaining to the first set of comments, that we get the city attorney's opinion? Or are we happy with where we are?
I'm happy with where we are. This is the first I've heard of any issues of this type, and I don't know that we need to look into them any farther. Yeah, I'm not in favor of doing so.
Well, I would be in favor of doing so. We've got a couple of people who've expressed concerns about potential Brown Act violations. I think that we need to know what the facts are. So I would be supportive of just taking reports from the people who are making these allegations.
Let me just say two things that, without getting into a long discussion about this. There was a period, as Francesco knows, when in fact we had finished our work and turned it to the council, and as far as we knew, we were done with the matter. Council's asked us to review it. That is now part of our work plan based on that request. With regard to what I may or may not have said about email, I can't remember what the context was or what we were talking about at the moment, or so I really can't answer that without looking at the video.
The committee members get some kind of basic training on Brown Act issues.
Yes, they do, and I believe there was special training for SEJC.
Just a few months ago.
Yeah, a few months ago, we had an hour or two special training session. I provided an overview of the act. Commissioners were active in asking questions and seemed to be digesting the information I was giving and understanding what their obligations are.
Yeah, I mean, you're sort of in the line of a lot of issues that influence people on one way or another, pro and con, and so it's pretty important that you follow the letter of the Brown Act law.
As far as I'm concerned, we do, and we haven't had any email discussion of anything.
Yeah.
I don't know what more I can say, but I'm perfectly happy to have the city attorney look at the issue if that's what you want to do. I don't think there's anything we have to hide.
Well, I think since this has come up, that if you got some basic fact finding, I don't know that we need to go into a major study, but, sort out what these assertions are and perhaps get back to us. I mean, as Councilmember Pilch says, up to this point, I think things have gone pretty well, but there's some indication to the latter we should probably know.
Yeah.
It seems like what we had asked them to do and what their work plan states refers directly to the ordinance, which isn't written yet.
Right.
So it's a little hard to totally understand how that could be, or I'm certainly not an expert in this. I think having you give it a little bit of an overview is a good idea.
If that's a consensus of the council, I'll chat with the speakers and the committee chair and gather some information. I'm not expecting a formal investigation where I interview witnesses and that kind of thing, but I'd be happy to report back on that at the next meeting.
I think that's reasonable.
Is there any statute of limitations on Brown Act violations? This was now several months ago.
There is, depending on the alleged violation.
So I wouldn't say it's a consensus of the council. It's the majority of the opinion. I don't believe the city attorney should spend any time or money looking at this, frankly.
Okay, I do think the majority would like a little attention to it. Are there other comments on their work plan?
Do we have, I guess this is really this might be more of a question for staff than it is for the committee, but do we have an expected time when we will hold the meeting contemplated in the SODA law for discussing how to spend the proceeds?
Yes, we just started collecting the tax on April 1st. So we wanted to get a few months under our belt to really see what kind of revenue we had to deal with. And we were thinking about late fall to hold the community meeting.
Okay, thank you.
Great. Any other comments? Go ahead.
No. Well, I would move acceptance of the work plan.
Second.
Councilmember Barnes?
Yes.
Councilmember Maass?
Yes.
Councilmember Nason?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Pilch?
Yes.
Mayor McQuaid?
Yes, and the motion carries.
Thank you.
Thank you to both you and to Jack for coming this evening and sharing your work with us. Okay. Item 6-2, proposed Albany Creeks and Albany Hill open space maintenance and capital improvement projects. May we have a staff report, please?
Yes, just wanted to provide an overview before our consultants start this evening. We have Bob Birkland and Drew Getting from RDG. They are the ones who have provided us both with the creeks plan as well as the conceptual plans for the access and circulation as well as the bridges on Albany Hill. So I'll turn it over to you guys in just a moment. I just wanted to give council a quick overview. The CIP on Albany Hill and RDG concept plan designs were taken directly from the Creekside Master Plan, which was an approved document. And you can tell in the staff report and in the spreadsheet for costs, for the summary of costs, that we identify specific areas. The creek maintenance was drafted by RDG, and I wanted to distinguish between the Cerrito and Middle Creek. Those we access typically through Albany Hill. We have the lower Cordnesis Creek, which is referred to the area from San Pablo to the railroad tracks. That is actually handled, and the cost of maintenance is actually handled through the MOU we have with UC Berkeley and with the City of Berkeley. And then all other sections of Cordnesis Creek that are within Albany are maintained from the Creek Fund, which is our Measure R fund. Albany Hill Vegetation Management, again, was taken directly from the Creekside Master Plan. And then we have the Lower Cordnesis Creek CIP project, which is directly out of our approved CIP book for 2016 to 2020. The goal for this evening, I wanted to be very clear. We've provided you with substantial amount of information, both through the vegetation plans for Albany Hill and also the maintenance plans for the creeks, as well as some really wonderful eye candy for you to look at for the CIP projects for access and circulation. Tonight, really, the direction we're looking for is, are we going in the right direction? Do you want us to continue down this path? You're not being asked to approve the concept plans exactly. We still need to go through a public process. Park and Recreation will still need to get together. We'll still need to hire someone to do the design work. We'll have to send out an RFP for that. We will have plans and specifications that will come back to you after it goes through the appropriate advisory bodies. So we told you during our staff told you during our strategic planning process that we would bring back to you ways to spend down Measure R. Because we do have a fund balance, and we've been waiting for an opportunity, for instance, to purchase more land, and by the time the bond expires, we really need to have spent that money as well as come up with a plan to spend it in the next few years. And I think that we've put together some really good ideas for you. If you agree with that approach, that's what we're looking at this evening. And then projects will come back to you either one at a time, or one of the ideas from RDG would be to have all of the access and circulation projects come back as one project, and that might actually help to save some money, and it's more efficiency of scale there. So with that, I do want to turn it over to our consultants. The last thing I have on a slide, which we can talk about at the end, is if you have any specific questions on costs or how we might spend down the money, I do have a slide for that, the summary of costs.
I have two quick questions. One, I would presume, looking at this, that all the funds that were dedicated to playgrounds or recreation fields, that's all been spent or taken care of?
Yes, it's either allocated in the CIP plan, which you have adopted, and then also there's, I believe, a balance of $31,000 for maintenance, which we can use up in a blink of an eye with the types of things we're doing at our playfields.
And you mentioned Park and Rec reviewing this. Will planning and zoning be involved in any of this? I know it's a little bit out of their purview.
It doesn't have anything to do with zoning issues. I don't know that it would
No.
necessarily need to go through planning and zoning. If there was anything, for instance, the bridge on Adams, I know that's something that we have advocates that would help connect the Bay Trail. You know, there might be a necessity to go through maybe traffic and safety, for instance, but at this particular point, we're coming directly to you about our creeks, except for the stuff, the creeks that are on Albany Hill, and then the rest of it would go through Parks and Recreation.
Yeah, I only bring it up because I know, being my appointee, we have a very good landscape architect on planning and zoning who might have some interesting comments if it was ever presented to him.
Okay. With that, I'll turn over. I believe Bob Berkland is going to go first.
Do I speak into, oh yeah, I do, speak into the mic. Thank you for engaging the Restoration Design Group in this Albany Hill series of projects on Albany Hill and Cerrito Creek and the management plan. We're excited to be back here. We love working with you. My name's Bob Berkland. I'm Principal Landscape Architect with RDG. With me tonight is Drew Getting, the President of RDG. And I was really happily surprised to find out that Albany Hill is open for me to go walking there. I arrived here about 20 years ago or 17 years ago, and I thought Albany Hill was restricted. I thought it was Native Indian site, Native American site, and you couldn't go up there. So all these years, never made it up there. But now I can go back, and hopefully you'll see some exciting improvements tonight that you might be able to engage to make it even better. Let's see, I gotta run this thing. So this project is really costing focused. I'm going to try and move along a little quickly because I have quite a few slides. It's a big site. There's 5 projects, 4 land-based projects. But we had to design something to cost estimate. So you will see sketches. And I don't know, do you have packets of the PowerPoint and some of the sketches with you? So what you'll see tonight is new?
They do have the sketches, yes.
You have the sketches,
They don't have your PowerPoint presentation.
And you have this plan here that shows the trail layout. Okay, that'll be good to have because it's hard to get that on a slide. So quickly, just wanted to mention that there are these wonderful local connections. I know you're doing a lot of work. You've done a lot of work. You have Pierce Street Park going in. I think it's important to not lose sight as you move this project forward with connecting it, Albany Hill, to all these places and all those places to Albany Hill. This gives you an overview of those connections, creeks, Ohlone Greenway, and Pierce Street Park. So for the Albany Hill projects, there are these 5. We'll go through them, the first 4 with graphics. The signage one is simply a costing effort that we engaged in to see, what would it cost to design and fabricate a signage program of some varying intensity for the Albany Hill area. So let's look at this trail concept, see how it shows up on your screen. PowerPoint's always a challenge, moving from one office to another, but not great. But I'll just point out for the folks, or Drew, could you point out, that'll help. A little hard, but down at the bottom and further down are the Taft steps. That'll be one of the projects we looked at. Up at the yellow zone there, Drew, that's the Taft turnaround for everybody. And then the next turnaround where he's not going to be able to reach is Jackson. And then over where you can almost reach at the end there, Drew, that's Madison. So that gets people oriented here. Now we're going to show some enlargements here, but that's the basic overview. Signage would cover the whole area if you were to engage that. So focusing in on, we'll get to Taft steps in just a bit. It's off the basic graphic, but now what we're going to focus on is the Taft to what we call the swing area near the summit. So you can see here this red line engaging the users on the west side of the existing fire road. We'll get into the description of that a little bit later. Let me just get through this and show you that that would be a new alignment to the summit and the swing area. Then here, the Jackson to Taft Trail, taking off from Taft. Instead of the white line that you see leading you straight down, perpendicular like an old miner's trail, we're proposing to abandon that and create a more meandering trail using some of the social trails that are there and use some of the felled eucalyptus that we'll probably encounter through all this work to obliterate the trail and guide people down this new, more sustainable route. Then here, the lower portion from Jackson to Madison, you see it in yellow line. That is because primarily that trail will be the existing trail, just enhanced. So let's look at some images and design sketches then. Quickly, we'll hit Taft. First, I'll show you some existing photos. Here you can see this bedrock condition that's all the way up on Taft, the result of the road installation. A 3-foot sidewalk that's nearly unusable at this point. And off to the left of the photo, you see that wood stair. That's the private stair, and it does turn away from your view here. But apparently some public users have been using this private stair, and that's been a concern. And that in part is because the existing access is right here at these steps. So you can see how close the proximity is. And that's important to note when we get into the design thinking here for the Taft steps. So basic approach, simple, durable, and something with some civic scale. So just one proposition here for you to look at. You can see the private stair. You can see the street bulb out announcing the base of the step. It utilizes the bedrock shelf condition there, brings you up to a landing and then up further to the trail up to the summit. Much more design work would be necessary to get into this, but this is where we took it. We drew a elevation for you to see how between the private stair and the new stair we could enhance that Toyon grove that's already there. Kind of make the whole site a little bit more legible, a little bit like the, if I have the name right, the Catherine stair or walk area, which I think is a nice example of this type of work. Now let's move to the, back up to the Taft turnaround, to the ADA route to the swing area. This is the first of the trails section. So we're going to go from the Taft turnaround up to the summit and to the swings. Then we're going to go from Taft down to Jackson and then Jackson to Madison. Here we are at the Taft turnaround and Fire Road looking up. You've got a steep Fire Road. First idea was, well, let's just regrade the Fire Road and put the ADA path on there. Lots of problems with that, mixing fire service vehicles with ADA would require a very durable, very expensive surface that would be too dramatic, I think, on this hill to serve all needs. So could we just leave that Fire Road as is and try a new trail? That's what you'll see coming up. Here's the look north, the view north as you come down. You can see the eroded condition in this steep. On the right-hand side, you can see the cut bank of the Fire Road. Here's the swing. Beautiful views from up there, beautiful views along the way. And the summit area is just up to the right in this photo here. So our approach is to parallel the Fire Road with an accessible route, concrete. It's the most durable surface. I'm sure that there'll be consideration as you go forward to use decomposed granite that hasn't, or some sort of stabilized granite surface. Those have not been very successful in the Bay Area. There's a lot of maintenance involved with those, but we do love them. We just don't, we're not sure about the maintenance burden on you. ADA parking should be included at Taft if this is going to be an ADA route. And there's an opportunity, and this is the big opportunity, and we'll show you a sketch of this in a moment, to really look at the whole Taft turnaround area and regrade it, open up some of the eucalyptus, revegetate with native oaks, and make the whole area, you know, it was, when the Taft Road was put in, it was, you know, roughly cut into the landscape there. Now you have an opportunity to come in and be just as rough, but to do it with a restoration focus and restore the land back. You have very little native vegetation. All of the undergrowth can be readily revegetated, and some of the eucalyptus probably should be removed anyway. So in plan view, the sketches that you've already seen show ADA parking and a crosswalk leading you from the lower part of the picture up to a new sidewalk apron that would gain you access to the Fire Road and also gain you access to this new ADA route, which would then parallel the side of Albany Hill at an accessible grade below 5%, come to a junction that you see on your map, and give you a spur up to the summit and out to the back. So looking at a few of these sketches. This is the view from, conceptual sketch of that area. A couple of the other features, low log, a salvage log, vehicle barrier to keep the openness of the Taft turnaround and accent the verticality of all the eucalyptus trees, not the bollards and cabling around there, which you don't need to restrict the vehicles. You could use the eucalyptus logs for that. Signage in red, and down on the lower right-hand side of this photo, the route down to Jackson. A typical view at maybe one of the viewpoints along the ADA route. Obviously, we won't take all the branches off the eucalyptus trees, but it's easier to draw it that way. Then let's go from Jackson to Taft, and then, or actually Taft to Jackson, even though it's called the Jackson-Taft Trail, and then further down to Madison. So again, our proposal here, as I mentioned, realign, use felled eucalyptus, put in a more sustainable trail alignment so you have less erosion and a better user experience, and a trail that takes better advantage of the wonderful topography and vegetation on Albany Hill. So we'll walk through a few photos here. This is looking right down from Taft. You can see the steep trail there as it leads away. This is a side trail just out of view that people utilize to get back up to Taft if they don't want to take this steeper route right up to the cables. We would anticipate leaving that in place. Then you make it down to the Jackson turnaround. At the far end, at the center of the photo, you see the entrance that leads you up to Taft. Then here's a more detailed photo of that same thing. Just up from here, it's quite eroded. There are timber steps that are in disrepair, all of which could be part of this project. If we move now from Jackson to the Madison Trail, this is the most complex part of the trail system. Although the existing trail is in actually relatively good shape, and the vegetation is wonderful. A lot of native species in this section of the trail. So we got to look at these climbing switchbacks. You'll see sketches of that, restoring the BMX area, and dealing with a few other areas, including the Madison street end. So here we are at Jackson, stepping off the sidewalk. We're just going to walk down a few of these images here, steep steps with eroded side cutting trail. Same condition here on the steeper turns where people are cutting the corners and just causing erosion, and then you can see no one's using the steps now because they're off to the side. When we get down to the bottom, we encounter the swale that comes off of Madison, and there's no crossing there, so in any sort of water event there would be no access across there, and there's a real simple solution for this condition. An eroded trail here just beyond Madison, just below it, the Madison end. Here's this important to note eroded gully right off the corner, the northeast corner of the Madison street end. A bit of a challenge here, and an unfortunate place that you're going to have to spend some money. It's not going to do much for you, but it's something you should address before it becomes a bigger issue. And the Madison street end itself. So let's look at some sketches then for propositions. Again, maybe it's a good idea to link Taft, Jackson, and Madison in their the design vocabulary, materials, and approach. So here we're using felled, salvaged eucalyptus logs to create a retaining wall on the left that maintenance has asked for. Use them on the side of the timber stair sections so that we eliminate this side cutting, and also define a vehicle barrier that can also function as seating and keep the views open. Very low cost. There you see it in plan view of the retaining wall on the bottom. to the left of the photo, the way up to Taft. Initially, you go up some steps, and then it would turn into a trail, signage in red, an expanded sidewalk in gravel, and then a renewed timber descent from Jackson into the Jackson-Madison Trail. Here's an example of this fan-type timber structure, which allows shortcutters to use the innermost side and move quickly and jump up risers, and others that need, you know, a 6 to 8 inch riser to use the outside and get the same situation. Big logs, obliterating side cutting, and also the position of these trails, which for the most part it's already doing this at large trees. A plank bridge down at the swale below Madison. Very simple construction. You don't need any concrete abutments or any railing or any other intervention, just a simple plank. And a turnpike trail here. You can see in your sketch that we're elevating the trail and putting a gravel base under it to allow for drainage to flow through. Maybe the opportunity to enhance that swale if funding was available. And then at Madison Street End, opening up Madison Street End, if traffic safety public works will allow for the removal of that guardrail and the placement of robust, well-anchored 10 by 10, 12 by 12 wooden bollards, serve the same function essentially, and make it more open so that people are wandering down Madison, not on the sidewalks as people often do in the neighborhoods. They don't have to encounter the very narrow condition at the bottom of the photo. This is where that gully is, and where we have a very narrow condition here. That's about all the room you can get there without getting into a much more serious retaining wall. So here you can see, just opening things up. The turnpike trail actually moves. If you look at your sketch closely, you can see the dashed line. That's the existing edge of trail. We're moving that further away from the swale to just open up the area and make things more sustainable. And here's the street end sketch showing how that would look if you move through that. So as I mentioned, signage, it's important. We think along with the design vocabulary and materials, it adds a lot of legibility to the site. We would encourage you, though, to not oversign. There are quite a few signs that have been damaged and thrown over on the Jackson to Madison Trail. We wouldn't encourage putting any more signs on that trail. They don't, it's been proven they don't dissuade any behavior anyway, particularly down in a trail where no one's watching. So we would suggest that you just have that kind of regulatory signage up at the trailhead and hope for the best. So construction costs and design fees. I'll move through these rather quickly, but if you have detailed questions, I've got the cost estimate with me here. Taft steps. This shows you all the detail that went into that. These are conceptual cost estimates, but they're done professionally, if I can say that. $96,000. Construction only. We'll get to the design. Another $96,000 to design it, probably. Just kidding. No, it's a little bit less than that, but this is just construction, and there is a contingency built into, well, it's not built into this actual number, it's built into the total, which you'll see. Then as we move to the Taft ADA route to the Swing and Summit, you see this number here. Kind of swung out of view, sorry about that. Here it's $235,000. One of the big ticket items that we estimated would be $50,000 is just the concrete route, if I've got that right, and then the grading is significant. You could reduce this by reducing that grading, but I think this is your opportunity to heal up the scar that Taft Road put on the hill. Jackson to Taft Trail, $75,000. Construction only. A lot of materials. This is an earthen-based trail piece. A lot of the material here can actually be created from the salvaged eucalyptus trees, including these timber steps. And then Jackson to Madison, $111,000. Signage and the total, so you see signage up there at the top at $72,000 for fabrication of it. These would be very nice signs. This is not the cheap version of getting these signs up here. This would be a very, very nice job. Something you should consider in the future, there are these aluminum signs that you can print on, and you can print them on both sides of this thin aluminum. You can mount them into a frame. You can protect the second copy, which is turned inside out. Once the vandalism just gets to be too much on the sign, you open up the frame and just flip it over, peel off the plastic, and you have a whole fresh sign again. So you've got another, if you're finding that you can get 3 to 5 years out of these, then you get another 3 to 5 years. So the totals, you can see them up there. The construction total at 739. Let me pull out my cost estimate here. $739. Then a general conditions piece brings it up, adds another $170,000. So you're at $911,000 to do all 5 of these projects. And then we figured about $155,000 in design and engineering fees associated with that. So, oops. There's the design and engineering there. So now I'm going to quickly move on, and then we can address questions to the Cerrito Creek Bridge cost evaluation, Adams and Belmont. Adams, a 40-foot span, 12 feet wide, would allow for bicycles. 2 issues, utilities, and the lack of conveyance of the 100-year flow. Not insurmountable, but significant issues that will likely drive the cost up. There's the location in orange. You can see the proposed bridge location across Cerrito Creek. Some current photographs as we're surveying the alignment across, and a proposal for a simple bridge, prefabricated over concrete abutments and piers, which would be required in this location, I'm sure. Adams, in total, $346,000, $254,000 for the construction total. And those do include some contingency. Belmont, longer span, narrower. There's there's elevation change at Adams too, but a more significant one here. I should have mentioned it at Adams here, at Adams Street on the right-hand side there. We've got to get people in wheelchairs from the Adams sidewalk up onto the Adams Bridge. And if this is already not conveying the 100-year, it might have to be more. So you're likely to need a scissor ramp there, along with some stairs. I'm sorry, it's a ramp like like this that would allow a wheelchair to come up, and then maybe there's a stair in the middle or a stair at the end. As I recall, Drew knows more about these because he did the bridge surveying for all of this work. I think you have a fairly wide street right away there, so that helps you. So we went over that. So Belmont. Existing condition photo, as you approach it, you come up this way and it's off to your left. There we are surveying creek below. Really wonderful shady riparian condition there. Here we are conveying the 100-year flow in this. These are very schematic drawings, but still we know that we're conveying it here. You can see the earlier Adams one, much more constrained cross-section. Here you would not need the scissor ramp. Could be readily ADA accessible. Cost for this one, $275,000 for the construction, and a total of $379, including design and engineering. And that concludes that presentation for the trail and bridges.
You have a choice, Madam Mayor, if you would like to go ahead and hear the presentation about the creek maintenance plan. Don't need to go into a huge amount of detail on that, but or we can take questions about access and circulation.
Let's keep going.
Okay.
Here, just there. It's okay. You can get it from there.
Okay, thank you. I'll just use these buttons for recording. Oh, okay, great. All right, good evening, Mayor, council members. Pleasure to be here once again. Again, I'm Drew Getting. I'm the principal and founder of the Restoration Design Group, and I'm here to talk about maintenance on streams, which is maybe not the most exciting topic, but it's one that I really feel is very important. And having been involved in urban stream restoration for over 20 years, I've seen what good maintenance can do for creeks and what a lack of maintenance can do. And so I've had a lot of firsthand experience. I've also been heavily involved in working with the regulatory agencies, which has a lot of oversight in terms of how streams are managed. The other thing I'd want to just mention, as with the projects Bob was looking at, this is very much of a draft, and we really do want to have input in terms of how to make this a really useful and beneficial document to the city staff. So looking at creek maintenance, you really have to understand how creeks function, natural creeks function. It's very different than traditional engineering approach to flood control channels. And as I was mentioning before, the regulatory considerations are very important and fairly complicated. And then, of course, we had to look at what the maintenance activities have been in the city of Albany. Use the same slide that Bob was showing before. Albany is bookended by two creeks, Cerrito Creek to the north and Cornices Creek to the south. It also has Village Creek cutting through it in the middle. And even though the city of Albany doesn't actually own a lot of creek banks or creeks, we're fortunate in that a lot of it is publicly accessible, particularly along Cornices Creek and lower Cerrito Creek. So just real quick, I want to get into a little bit about natural stream functions. We talk about streams. I always feel obligated to bring up the concept of the watershed. And it's just important that we keep in mind that when we look at a stream such as Lower Cornices or Cerrito Creek, you're really looking at a system that has collected water and all sorts of other debris and garbage and pollutants from the entire watershed. And so we often look at a creek and we think about the water quality there, and we often don't make that association that it really has to do with how we're living over this landscape in a broader sense. So I think that's really important to keep in mind when we discuss maintenance with our community, and really for maintenance staff as well to keep this in mind and think about things that we can do to improve the water quality by impacting our watershed. One of the things that you'll start to see more and more of is stormwater treatment. It's a simple process by allowing stormwater to flow through a vegetated soil condition before it flows into the streams or into the storm drain system. This was built above Cornices Creek on 8th Street, but anybody's been over to the new Sprouts, you'll see that there's a series of them that have been recently constructed right in front of the grocery store. So those are now C3 requirements through the Water Board. But they can also be much more practical, and I put these slides in just because it's a really great demonstration. A local property owner just over on Cornices Creek in Berkeley side, he created his own swale. That's a stormwater treatment facility, and it works beautifully, very low cost, very simple to do. So they don't have to be these extremely engineered systems like you might see at Sprouts. Sometimes it's helpful to think about things that haven't worked so well when we start thinking about what we want to do better. And so I put this slide in of sort of a conventional flood control channel. And the conventional wisdom for flood control in this country really getting into effect after the Second World War was to straighten creeks, because when they're straight, they're actually steeper. You've taken out that kind of switchback that you would do if you were hiking a mountain. And of course, you remove all the vegetation because that slows down water. You're trying to get the water out of wherever you're trying to protect as quickly as possible. And because streams don't really like to go straight, you have to armor them with rock and riprap or concrete. And you end up with something that's not really a stream anymore. It's a flood control channel, and you've really lost the habitat and the value and the aesthetics of it. But that's fortunately not really allowed anymore. And I should also mention that Albany was fortunate in that they were not part of the Alameda County Flood Control District. For whatever reason, that didn't take place when the district really got going back in the 40s, and for that reason, the streams here were not put into conventional flood control channels. But the thing that was often forgotten in these conventional flood control channels was that streams not only transport water, but they also transport sediment. And in a lot of systems, huge amounts of sediment. It was sort of something that people didn't really get a handle on, the engineers didn't really get a handle on until they started to see many, many of these projects failing and filling in with sediment, and they got into very expensive maintenance regimes. So the concept of dynamic equilibrium is really central to understanding how a natural stream functions. You have stormwater and you have sediment constantly being put into these systems, and through all sorts of different storm events, from small to very intense storm events. But the streams start to create a balance with that, for the amount of sediment coming in and the amount of sediment going out. And I hope you have an opportunity to take a look at this scale, because it's really a great way to understand if something changes, like sediment load gets reduced because of urbanization, you end up having erosion in the streams. They start to adjust because they're out of balance. Just like if you start to increase the amount of storm flows coming into it, or the type of materials, you can offset that balance. So the thing that people who are managing our waterways today have to really come at it with this understanding of this concept of equilibrium, that these creeks are in balance, and how do we protect that balance and work with that natural system so we're not fighting against it. Part of that is understanding channel structure. The slide on the left shows a meander, and meanders are really important to streams. It's kind of like a skier going down a mountain. They cut back and forth, and it's a way that they distribute the energy as they go down the hill. And that's exactly what streams do with meanders. They distribute their energy evenly through the system and pile up all that energy at the bottom of the stream, or if you were a skier, you'd probably land in a big ball at the bottom of the mountain if you went straight down. It also creates changes in the depth of the channel. It creates pools and riffles, outside bends where there's deeper pools where fish can survive in the summer, and it creates riffles where the water becomes oxygenated. So it's part of that structure of the channel that's so important that we're trying to protect and enhance. Another key component of the stream channel is what's referred to as riparian vegetation, the type of plants that are adapted to living along streams. These were two photographs I took just last week of Village Creek. The one on the left is an area where there's no canopy cover, so the sunlight gets directly into the channel, and you can't even see the channel there because so much vegetation is building up in it. And it's having an adverse effect in that it's catching a lot of sediment. It's really starting to make that channel out of balance. just going 100 yards upstream is a section that has canopy cover, and you can see the channel. It's a very different open environment under there. From a distance, you can't see the channel. You see the riparian corridor, and you might think that that's full of vegetation and it's choked, but once you get in there, you realize it's actually open and water can move through there very efficiently. But it's when you start to think about all these pieces together, the channel structure, the riparian vegetation, and things like branches falling into the stream and rocks that are moving, that you get this complexity. And over time, this complexity is what creates habitat. And it's really important to think about because we often look at streams and they seem sort of messy. And I think a natural inclination for people who are charged with doing maintenance is to want to clean them up. And that's not always the best thing. Messy can be good. I'm glad my kids are not here to hear me say that. So regulatory considerations. The regulatory agencies have really gotten very serious about their oversight on streams, even though the legislation that provides their authority goes back many years. We have a couple major regulatory agencies that we have to work with when you're dealing with streams. The first one's the Army Corps of Engineers. They're authorized under Section 404 of the Clean Water Act. Their permit is often referred to as the 404 permit. And they really have this connection to navigable waterways. The Army Corps really got into business early with harbors and interstate commerce and canals. And so their whole thing was about maintaining the public trust of these waterways so that we could have interstate commerce. So if we have a waterway that's connected, even if it's a tiny little stream that only flows a couple months out of the year, if that's directly connected to a navigable waterway like San Francisco Bay, then the Army Corps of Engineers has a jurisdiction over that waterway. They also have a connection to the Fish and Wildlife Service, the federal agency. And of course, everybody knows that they're provided authority under the Endangered Species Act. You don't directly work with Fish and Wildlife. The Corps is the nexus to that agency if there's endangered species within a project area. The Water Board is the agency that's really become most active in terms of managing or overseeing streams and projects alongside them. They're authorized under Section 401 of the Clean Water Act, and they get involved once the Army Corps gets involved. So if Army Corps has jurisdiction, then the Water Board suddenly has jurisdiction as well. They actually have a separate authorization under the California Porter Cologne Act, which is one of the most stringent water quality acts in the country. But typically, because of the federal structure that's in place, they don't typically enact that. And there's also the California Department of Fish and Wildlife, state organization under the Fish and Game Code 1600. They're also responsible for the California Endangered Species Act. They really have sort of a broad authority on anything that has to do with a riparian corridor. So not just the creek channel, but the whole vegetation that's following along it. So these three agencies and their rules have to be considered when you go in and do work in a channel. And if you go in and actually read the regulations, it's easy to think that you shouldn't do anything in the stream channel. And it's difficult for an organization like us to say, this is what you should do, because there's all sorts of exceptions and there's a lot of rules and it's complicated. And we want to make sure that we're not providing direction that's going to get the city in trouble with one of these agencies. But it really does limit what you can do without getting a permit for a project. So that's something that's really important to keep in mind as we move forward. And it really does sort of limit what can be done. I should also mention, too, that one of the elements that we looked at in this plan was the City of El Cerrito's California Fish and Wildlife agreement that they have for maintenance. And what they did was they got a permit in advance for all their maintenance activities they expect over the next 5 or 10 years. And that's something that we evaluated for the City of Albany, and I'll get to that a little bit later. I have this slide back in a second time because I wanted to talk a little bit more about the creeks, and specifically in terms of management. Cornices Creek on the left, I think Penelope was pointing that out in her first slide. Lower Cornices Creek is part of a MOU with the City of Berkeley, City of Albany, and the University of California for restoration and conservation easement area and a maintenance agreement. So there's a program to really manage Cornices Creek. along that section. The two most upper portions reaches from San Pablo to 8th Street are not currently in that yet because they haven't gone through the restoration process and created the conservation easement. Village Creek is pretty much entirely within the Albany Village area, and the University of California is responsible for managing that. So the work that the City of Albany's Maintenance Department is really doing is primarily on Lower Cerrito Creek and Middle Creek. And a good portion of Cerrito Creek is within the City of El Cerrito. So their area that really is of maintenance concern is a fairly small geographical area. Most of the stream areas are privately owned. If anybody has any questions when we get through this issue, please feel free to stop me. So we recently took a walk with the City Maintenance Department, and we went and looked at sort of their common areas where they've had maintenance issues. And we identified these 8 or 9. 9 was brought up by the Friends of Five Creeks as an issue, not so much with the city maintenance staff. But, excuse me, really looking at Cerrito Creek west of San Pablo Avenue, looking at Middle Creek, both in the swales as it comes off Madison Street, number 5 and 6, and then the open section down at number 7. 4 and 3, we had a difficult time getting into. Middle Creek in that area is completely overgrown with vegetation. It's really inaccessible in that area, and that could be a separate project. And then also looking at the reach alongside Creekside Park along the City of El Cerrito. One of the things you'll see in the plan is we looked at these areas, what has been done, and provided some basic guidance in terms of what the city can do, and somewhat also what they shouldn't be doing in terms of maintenance activities. So some of the considerations we looked at, seasonal work. If you were to get a permit, you're going to be really restricted in terms of when you can do work, and the dry summer months is ideal. Things like with protecting raptor nesting habitat, some of those elements need to be considered. Protecting water quality and habitat, trying to have somebody look at a stream and wonder, well, this branch is down in the creek, should we take that out or should we not take that out? Is that habitat? Those are difficult questions that get asked by maintenance staff. And at the bottom, we mentioned that there's technical assistance, and there may be times when the city staff are really going to want to look for somebody, either a biologist, a native plant expert, or somebody with stream expertise to weigh in on some of those decisions. There's emergency work that does happen, and the city can take action. If there's an emergency, block culverts, they can open up if there's property or health and safety considerations. We talk about when not to do maintenance. It's really important. Tree removal. That really falls under the vegetation management, and the thing to really keep in mind there is that there's native plants that the regulatory agencies all want to see protected and propagated, and there's non-native. And even within the non-native, there's really invasive plants, the ones that really are a problem to control. A lot of you'll see on the Albany streams, English ivy has just taken over huge swaths. And what happens is that it really reduces the amount of biodiversity. Start to climb trees, and they can actually kill trees. So that's one of the primary maintenance activities, is really trying to stay on top of some of those invasive plants. We also talk about stream bank erosion, dealing with culverts and sedimentation as well. Just going to run through some of the pictures that everybody can take a look at. This is looking at Cerrito Creek downstream of San Pablo Avenue. On the lower right here, you can see there's no riparian canopy cover there. There's a lot of direct sunlight, and that's why you get this very dense vegetation on the banks. And this is Adams Street crossing on the upper left-hand photo. This is Middle Creek on the left, right before it goes into the culvert that kind of cuts beneath the corner of the blind center. And this picture on the right shows a lot of sediment that sometimes gets deposited behind the blind center from Middle Creek and from the sediment that's coming down from Albany Hill. This is the end of Madison Street on the left, and the photo on the right is looking at that gully that Bob had mentioned that's become a maintenance problem. And they've been working on trying to redirect flow away from that gully and putting it down to the left side of Madison Street there into that swale. Here's some other pictures of the swale. There's some erosion on the swale on the left. And looking at the photo on the right is another area where ivy is really starting to climb some nice native oak trees. This is the confluence of Middle Creek and Cerrito Creek that was apparently jackhammered up a bit to allow fish to make it up over those concrete weirs. And then now we're looking at two pictures alongside Cerrito Creek at Creekside Park. The photo on the upper left is the fire road there, which may have some erosion issues and how the water's flowing off and potentially causing some bank erosion. There is some bank erosion in this lower right-hand photo, although that is probably mostly from people climbing up the bank. And so actually providing a bridge crossing there would be maybe the best way to address the erosion that's happening at that site. So in terms of future considerations, some of the things that are being looked at is the development of a MOU for Cerrito Creek and Middle Creek with the Blind Center that owns a lot of that property there. There's also some private property owners on the right. Again, looking at this Department of Fish and Wildlife maintenance permit, which would allow the city to have some official approval in terms of their maintenance program. And it would also allow the city to have a better understanding if there are any endangered species in the area that work is being done, and steps that could be taken to mitigate any of those kind of impacts. I should mention that even with a state permit, it does not protect the state or the city from impacting a listed species. So even if you have a permit and you stepped on a protected listed species, you can still be liable for it. So important, your permit gives you a lot of guidance. It's not full protection in terms of endangered species regulations. We also looked at a maintenance activity reporting program, came up with a form so that the city could actually develop a record. They get called out to do some maintenance. They would be able to have this form that would help sort of identify what are the specific maintenance issues that they're addressing, what is the concern, when did they go out, what actions were taken. And that would help to sort of start developing a bit of a record for maintenance activities that could help inform future activities or approaches. And then the last piece is thinking about a program to provide some outreach to homeowners to help private property owners understand these issues of streams and things that they can do and things they shouldn't do, and when they would need a permit or not a permit if they're addressing any of these problems. So that pretty much sums up our approach to the maintenance and management plan at this time. And then I guess maybe we can take questions on both presentations.
Yes, I wanted to point out that we have a summary of costs. Gail Rossi, our program manager in Public Works, took the ideas presented and also associated them with the number of labor hours it would take to complete some of those tasks. And that's how we came up with the $60,000 annual cost for creek restoration and creek maintenance, I should say. We also have Margot Cunningham here, who is our newly hired staff member helping out with vegetation management on Albany Hill. We are not going into a detailed presentation on Albany Hill vegetation management. We've gone through that with you in detail over the years. You have a copy of the management plan, and we've identified very specific areas that we would try to approach in these first 2 years of vegetation management, and they're very specific in one of the attachments that you have. We also have Shelley Putzer here, who did an excellent job in reaching out to the community and the stakeholders, Friends of Albany Hill, Friends of Albany, or Friends of Five Creeks. I know that RDG also met with Friends of Five Creeks to vet this as well. So I feel like the key stakeholders that typically show up at these meetings to offer us their advice and their long-term experience, because they've been here volunteering for years and years and years, were consulted on this as well. And we do have Public Works staff here as well to help out with that. I wanted to, in case you end up having questions about it, this is a summary of costs for the first year for maintenance for both the hill and the creeks. That is in your attachment. I'm not going to go through it in detail, but as you can see here for Albany Hill, there are some very specific areas that are called out. And we also do talk about what it would cost to and an ongoing maintenance. If you take all the projects that we're recommending in these next 2 years, fiscal years, you can see that we have roughly a balance of $211,000, and we can very easily spin that down, getting a jump start here. But continuing on, if we were to play out all of the high priority projects in the Albany Hill Master Plan, then you can see our annual maintenance cost there. And again, we can address any of those questions that you might have with Shelley. Here, the creek costs $60,000. If we were to stick to the plan that was presented to you tonight, it would take us roughly 6 years to spend down the money for maintenance that we have remaining in the creek fund. And then if you talk about the large-scale projects that we were talking about with, that Bob brought us through with the PowerPoint, then we had a cost of, we're actually, with what we have in the bank, we would go over by $55,000. And we do understand these are conceptual costs. We determined that through the MOU and what the MOU pays for, depending on what the monitoring report comes back for every year, we could spend we've spent traditionally, based on actuals, anywhere from $18,000 to $68,000 each year for the lower creek there. And then we do have the CIP project that's currently in the CIP plan, which leaves us, this is right now our balance for Measure R CIP balance. And again, just a conceptual cost there. So this is kind of takes everything that you've heard tonight and summarizes it into a cost sheet so that if you're wondering how we might spend down the Measure R money and what we spend on the MOU costs, it's there for you to look at. And with that, we'll try to answer any of your questions.
Any questions from council? Michael?
I have three. I guess we'll do it from the lowest point to the highest point. And the first is that lower part of Cordonices Creek is very low. And I recall when Ray was our Public Works Director, there was an issue with not only the culvert being blocked, but at high tides, especially with sea level, the water comes way in and starts to flood that area. There's some private homes right there by the School for the Blind, I think, and their backyards get wet. I don't know how you can ameliorate that problem. I mean, if sea level rises, and at a high tide, it's going to get flooded back there. But do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, no, it's the sea level rise issues are definitely a concern for coastal communities like Albany, and there's sort of limited things that you can do, but certainly creating capacity within the culvert system is one of them that is valuable. So not only are we having climate change that's creating sea level rise and a higher base elevation that we're trying to drain to, but we're also getting more significant storm events associated with it as well. So thinking about long-term improvements for greater storm resiliency is wise for sure. It's probably a laundry list of things that would kind of go into that. There's not like a sort of simple answer in terms of what should be done, but it should be part of the thinking of coastal communities for sure.
And second question is just north of Madison, the end of Madison Street. There's a couple of old Native American drilling holes in there. So I'm wondering what liability or risks or issues there are vis-a-vis historical Native American sites in that area and improving the trails.
Yeah, I think before the trail work is done, there should be a CEQA review of the work, and as part of that evaluation, a look at the Native American resources would be a part of that. So I'm sure that would be on the radar of that CEQA review for the project. And they would, there's a process that archaeologists go through for CEQA to look at what the resources are, and then also all sorts of mitigation. So if thinking about proximity, and then if there's excavation going on, if remains or artifacts are found, there's a whole process in which the project has to stop and have that cataloged and so forth. But definitely a very interesting resource that should be protected, and as part of the project evaluation, that would certainly be considered.
And final question, I've hiked up on the ridge of Albany Hill, and I've often thought there would be killer views up on top of this hill if you just chopped down some of those ugly old eucalyptus and you could see the bay. So I take it you're going to do that, judging from the presentation, at least towards the west. Is there any plan to do that towards the east?
Not that I'm familiar with, and not as a part of the planning that went into this as well. So, that I think in terms of looking at large-scale eucalyptus removal, that's kind of a urban forestry project that would be, sort of a separate project and would have to be evaluated in terms of, impacts for bird nesting and all sorts of other issues. I guess I will say that eucalyptus removal can be also a very hot topic. Some people love the trees, other people really want to see them removed. Oakland Hills have had all sorts of debates going on about that. So, I think there's people that would probably love to see that. If you took the eucalyptus down, the Albany Hill's going to look a lot shorter, I think. I think it's something that could be looked at in terms of an initial study to say what could be done. Could something be done selectively if we wanted to look at views? What's something that would be more comprehensive? What are the issues? But it's really a separate project than the improvements.
The Albany Hill Master Plan calls for just kind of natural attrition. So as they die, we remove them, but we really don't have a plan in place to go in there and aggressively remove the trees. That wasn't the intent of the master plan.
But you will need some logs, right? You got to cut down some of them for logs.
There's probably more than enough logs, I would think, are there?
I tried. Okay.
Yeah, some questions, big and small. One specifically to Cerrito Creek. Might any of these mitigations and restoration efforts help in? There's flooding at the end of Adams almost every year, and could these make that better, or could it lessen that flooding issues?
Yeah, I think, and we had to look at some very quick hydraulics to look at the bridge crossing. So technically, when you build a bridge, you have to show to the Army Corps of Engineers that the bridge can pass the 100-year storm event plus some freeboard. We looked at Adams and realized if we built a bridge there, not only would the stormwater go under it, it would already be all around it. That area has a real flood problem. I think some challenges to that is that there's a lot of utilities crossing Adams, so it's going to make modifying that creek area there challenging. But I think that's essentially what would eventually have to happen, is that something kind of a comprehensive restructuring of that stream, because it is too narrow, would have to take place in order to really alleviate the flood issue. So that would be a significant project.
I guess there's one very specific question about Albany Hill. There's a light at the end of Jackson that shows up. I presume that's an existing light in the Jackson turnaround.
Yes.
But there's none at Taft. I mean, I'm usually up there during the day, so I never paid attention that.
Our survey, we didn't have a survey, so we just moved quickly using Google Earth and Street View and a few site visits, and didn't bother with addressing lighting, really. It just happened that one was there, and there's
right. And there's also residents that kind of go right up to that, so I understand why there might have been a light there. I mean, was any kind of, I know this is a park that's mostly open during the day, but was lighting considered as any part of the planning or perspective on this?
No, and I think given the nature of Albany Hill, you'd probably want to avoid having any lighting.
We're trying to
on those trails.
Trying to avoid having some light up there on some other issue. And then, is there anything between DG and concrete for this ADA? I mean, I understand the DG issues over time. It does erode, and weather takes it out, and concrete's much more solid. But is there any medium between them?
Well, yes, or kind of allied with them. I mean, concrete, I mean, short of slabs of granite, concrete would be the strongest, more durable material you can use. It's far more durable than asphalt. So you're not going to use granite, so you're going to start with concrete as the most durable. And then you're going to move, then you might move to permeable concrete, which could be used. It's relatively new. We have only used a little bit of it. I can't stand here and tell you that it's a great product that's not going to have any problems. We had problems and with the installation of permeable asphalt on phase 3 of Cordonesis right along urban Ottima from 8th to 6th. That has cracked, and that's not the result of using permeable, I don't think, of using permeable asphalt, which allows the water to flow right through. It doesn't have any of the fine aggregate. I think it was a compaction issue during construction, which was just hard to pick up all of those. But I'm pretty sure that at the West Berkeley Bowl parking lot that's to the north of West Berkeley Bowl, if you're ever down there, that's all permeable asphalt. And it's actually pretty attractive as a parking lot, more attractive, I would say, than regular asphalt. Then there's a whole series of, moving down the scale, there's a whole series of stabilized, resin-stabilized aggregates. And you see them all over. Crissy Field's going to go through now. They were one of the first people, big projects, probably was still the biggest project. They used road oil initially. That has now failed. And now they're going to go in and spend, I can't believe it's just $5 million. It might be double that to redo it. And of course, they're well financed with private donations there, so they're going to be able to finance that. But at some point, yeah, it's going to be interesting. I'll probably be retired when they finally determine that DG just doesn't work when you get, like this year, 40 inches of rain. Works great in the desert areas that get 10 inches of rain and in really well-drained environments. We're on bay mud for the most part, and so Albany Hill is better. That's better soil for drainage, but we've just seen so many failures that it's hard to stand behind it and say, this is your product. And,
Yeah, if we ended up with DG in a situation like that, it would be a value engineering.
Concrete sounds really bad because you look at your garage and the oil stains on the concrete and you go, ugh. But they're using it for beautiful kitchen countertops. There's very fancy residential and commercial installations where it's used as flooring. Concrete is many different things, and better than using asphalt.
All right. And then finally, a bit of a comment, not so much of a question. I know you're trying to minimize signage, and I understand the reasons why you would do that. I just hope as this process unfolds that there's so much interesting information on geology, history, the Indian artifacts, the flora and the fauna, that somehow, as we develop this into a more interesting park, that there's situations where we can put that out in either kiosks that have information in them or some other form.
Yeah, you certainly can do that, and I think you're touching on it. The kiosk idea, I think, is, for me personally, is more successful than the inside site signage. And something struck me, we get kind of put our blinders on when we're doing these design projects, and we often just default to, okay, we're going to do the interpretive program now, and we're going to just stage them along at all the little events. And at a public meeting on site one time, someone said, I'm going to read that sign. I walk through here. They were saying, I walk through here all the time. I'm going to read that sign the first time. And I might stop at it again if I'm with somebody who's from out of town. Other than that, I'll never read it again. That's it. And this is coming from somebody who uses the site on a daily basis. So it really struck me that, wow, who are we trying to get this information to? And the result, I think, is often in the vandalism you see. But the kiosk idea, keeping things out at Madison, at Jackson, and at Taft, and not distributing them throughout the site, or integrating them into rocks or into the pavement so that they're just not, they're more durable. And it might be a good idea.
Thank you. Just add something to that. I think it's kind of interesting with the technology now. We had a client as a land trust, and they are working on a kind of a pioneering program to have an interpretive program that essentially works through your phone. So there's not signs out on the landscape, but if you have the program and you start with the site you're at, as you walk through, the georeferencing will pick up where you're at, and it'll give you an opportunity that you can learn more about where you are, what you're looking at, in a way that leaves the site completely clear and open, but there is this wealth of knowledge that's, tied into the site.
Okay, thank you.
Other questions?
There's such a wealth of information here. I don't quite know where to begin. There's quite a lot to it. I take it that sort of the guiding principles for all of this project level planning is the Albany Hill master plan.
That's correct.
And what you're looking for from the council is prioritization, or
well, all of the projects in the CIP, the access and circulation projects, are all in the Albany Hill Creekside Master Plan as projects. So, and given the amount of funding that we have and our direction to try to spend that down over the next 3 to 5 years, we could do all of them. We could bring back to them one at a time. We could bring it back next week or our next council meeting and have an idea of prioritizing them. Or we could do the access and circulation projects all as one project, minus maybe the bridges, minus definitely, I think, the bridges. So really what we're asking for is tonight is that you just say, yes, you're moving in the right direction, keep going. And that's what we can do, because we need that information also to help prepare our lighting and landscape district engineering reports. We can put what we plan to do in that roughly next year, what we've accomplished this year, and that's coming to you in the next 1 or 2 council meetings. So you don't have to give any specific direction on what you like or don't like tonight. Tonight is just a keep working on it kind of thing. And yes, spend down that measure our money in the next 3 to 5 years.
Okay. And it does seem, at least in my experience, with this much local money going into these projects, there must be great potential for additional funds to come in. I would think that the Department of Fish and Wildlife, and especially if we have a state agency on the Cerrito Creek, that we should have some strong potentials here for state funding. Now, I saw the information about the urban greening was not a source that was going to work.
Right.
But are we looking at, are we just focusing on spending what we have, or are we looking at leveraging? Are we investigating potential leveraging opportunities?
I think the leveraging opportunities come from Cordnesis Creek, because there's a lot of work that needs to be done there. Whereas in Albany Hill, as was presented, we don't have a lot of creek to take care of, but we do have funds available to take care of the access and circulation. We also have funds available for maintenance for the next several years. If our cost estimates are correct, that we would spend $60,000 on there. So I believe that any kind of grant or leveraging opportunities really needs to be focused on Cordnesis Creek, lower Cordnesis Creek.
Okay. All right.
But we constantly look out for grants, yes.
Good.
So one quick question. I know at the Adams Street Bridge site is also where some PG&E gas lines travel. So was that taken into consideration with the cost, or is that just something where you just have to make sure that you do the engineering right and don't hit a line and it's not any more costly?
Yeah, I think we included some additional money for that process of first getting a topographic survey that also has the utility lines in it. And so we're also some time working with those agencies to really figure out where those pipes are. And it becomes a process of figuring out where do you stick those piers in, where do you, can get some space to drill through. And it means that maybe the bridge has to go longer, maybe it goes shorter, and have some sort of more creative approach, or where do you put it laterally and how do you make those connections. So it's definitely part of the process, and we're anticipating, some time to do that. Without knowing all what's there, it's at this point where it's, very much educated guesses in terms of what those costs would be.
Okay, thank you. And then my second question, I think, is more to staff. So I understand about the CIP projects and the funding, but I wanted to talk about the maintenance a little bit. I see that I think what you've laid out is that we can spend down monies for maintenance over the next few years. But what I'm interested in getting at is what would be the ongoing maintenance number and that we'd have to get funding for in the years following spending down all the money.
On that same spreadsheet I referenced earlier, it has those costs. It says Albany Hill annual maintenance costs beginning in basically the fiscal year 2020. Right now, there's no dedicated funds. We have a part-time staff fee of $6,500. I also have it up on the screen here. And then the ongoing vegetation management. There's also another attachment that we highlighted the high priority areas in your packet that come directly from the Albany Hill Master Plan. Those total $115,000 per year. We could do more, but we took the high priority projects. Again, it's got to be an evolving type thing. We've got to look at what we've accomplished, look at where our problem areas are, and evaluate on a yearly basis. But that would be our $121,500 could be our ongoing maintenance cost, vegetation cost for Albany Hill, and then $60,000 would be the ongoing creek cost.
Yeah, so if all other things stayed the same, which of course they don't, but if they did, then those would be the numbers
Our estimates, yes.
The estimates going forward for future years.
But that's creeks and vegetation. That's not all the access trails and...
That's correct. This is just maintenance.
But what about maintenance of trails and bridges and signage and all those kinds of things?
We don't have those costs included here. So in terms of replacing the signs or eventually replacing a concrete trail or so forth, I mean, those costs would be in addition.
Yeah.
But we don't have a number at this point.
No.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, that might be good information to have from RDG in the final output. I think that's a good point that Councilmember Nason is raising, that we'll have these hardscapes put in if we go through with this, but eventually they will need maintenance as well. That is a good point.
That's correct.
That's it for my questions.
Okay, I have a couple. It's a little confusing to me, the difference between vegetation management and maintenance. It seems like they kind of cross a little bit. Could you kind of define them quickly?
Well, I think vegetation management is one component of the stream management. So if you show up to a creek and look, what are all the things that are problems, what are the typical maintenance issues, a lot of them have to do with the vegetation. That's often the trigger that gets the city out. A branch comes down, it looks like it may cause erosion to the bank. And so managing the vegetation is really that piece that looks at is the vegetation causing a problem? What kind of vegetation is it? Is it native, non-native? And if it's non-native, it is invasive. And what are the priorities really for trying to stay after those invasive species? So it's the vegetation management is definitely a big component of the stream corridor management. And again, as we were looking at the regulatory agencies, the riparian vegetation along the creek is very much part of that regulatory oversight.
And same with Albany Hill, the majority is vegetation. Maintenance really does equal the majority of it is vegetation management. In addition, maintenance would be garbage pickup. Those additional tasks on that sheet, garbage pickup, when we have homeless encampments that we need to remove and so forth.
Okay, thank you. And then my last question, it talks about the escrow account for creek maintenance, I think for Coordinations Creek. Can you tell us, how much does Albany contribute every year? How much? How does that
Yeah,
work?
Jeff might have to.
Yeah, I don't know the specifics of that.
The bulk of the funds in that escrow account are an arrangement between the three parties, and it came from a sale of a portion of property from the university to the city of Berkeley. And so we're drawing down that. I think it was started at $400,000 or so. And
Okay, so it's not something we contribute to?
No.
Okay, thank you. Okay.
Could I ask one other question?
Sure.
I'm just curious if we've had, when we were looking at the cross and its wiring, I think it came as a surprise to a lot of us that, that we wouldn't have had a fire analysis of that situation. And I'm curious whether we've had wildland fire, people with expertise in wildland fire and the urban interface, looking at the adequacy of our buffer zones, whether we have adequate defensible space, and that whether that kind of analysis has been done with respect to the interface there.
Well, that's regulated, and I know our fire department annually does inspections to make sure, for instance, Bay Commons, I think it's their property line plus another 30 feet that they have to cut the grass back. But we consulted with fire throughout this process, and really the Albany Hill Master Plan, it's probably 90% fire prevention in terms of what we do up there. And that's what our consultant, when we wrote the plan, specialized in. But Shelley meets with the fire department, and they fight wildland fires, and much of that is regulated.
Okay, so it's just the peculiarity of structures and things that somehow fell through that screen. I'm talking about the wire and the eucalyptus that we wouldn't find. You don't think that we would find other urban interface problems?
I don't think so.
In the defensible space zone on Albany Hill?
I don't think so, no.
Okay.
Okay, then let's go ahead and open it up to public comment. Do you have speaker cards? If you're interested in speaking, if you could fill out a speaker card and turn it in here.
You may come up and speak first and then hand me the speaker card later.
Hi, short person. Hi, Amy Smolens, Albany Strollers and Rollers. It's good to live close. I was sitting at home getting some work done, and this was on TV. Your meeting was on TV, and I saw the plans about the Adams Street Bridge, and I got really excited, and so I ran on over. So here I am. I understand that it's going to be challenging, that there are complications about this, but it's a really important regional connection that I hope you guys will realize. Right now, there's an inland bike route that goes from Richmond to Oakland, and if you're coming from Richmond, for example, on Carlson Street, you then get dead-ended at the creek, and then you can get onto Jackson in Albany and connect connect to 10th and then the 9th Street Bike Boulevard that goes all the way to Oakland and all the way to Emeryville. And so basically this is the one little hole, and it's a really crucial hole because it would send people either onto the sidewalks or onto San Pablo, which a lot of people don't want to ride on. So this is really a crucial gap in a big regional bike route. So it's important not only to Albany, but filling this gap is very important regionally. So as we have the hole in the Bay Trail in Albany, we have the hole in the inland route in Albany too. And so I hope you guys will do what it takes to get this filled. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Carol Fitzgerald, co-chair of Friends of Albany Hill. So, yeah, thank you for going ahead with this. I do have comments. I do love what you've done for the Madison Street entrance, and I live on Madison Street too. But I think that's probably my favorite part. You have to come up with something other than concrete. I just cannot see concrete. And we're looking at all the sidewalks and garages with cracks and uplifting. I just can't be convinced that it's not a bigger maintenance problem, but it just doesn't go with the ambience of the hill. And I hike, Bear Valley Trail out in Point Reyes has the hard pack. I just think that you could put your minds and do something, come up with something better. I do want to mention that, and also the concrete steps on Taft Street. You quoted Catherine's walkway. However, a civic group built right over her concrete steps, the wonderful wooden steps that go up from Washington to Hillside. So I'm a little kind of ambivalent about that whole entrance at Taft Street. The parking on Taft Street is up at the turnaround. That's where people who are not in the neighborhood would go and enter the park. People walking in the neighborhood probably use that. I've always felt if the homeowner were so bothered, they would put a gate there and people wouldn't use their walkway. But that person that really wanted the steps repaired doesn't live there anymore. I don't know how the new people feel about it. But digging into the hill, that's why we passed the assessment to buy the east side of the hills. We just didn't want any more digging into the hill. So if you have to put steps there, I would like to see them be wood, like Catherine's walkway is from Washington. The other thing, I feel like you know so much about the creeks, but I don't feel like you really know about Albany Hill. Now, Friends of Albany Hill, and I've been active in it since 1990, our emphasis is the view on the hill is the hill. It's the nature. We lead our walks. We do our butterfly counts, our research projects that we do with different people from Cal. They're all about what's on the hill, and I have not had any audience with them, and I think I could give them a lot of information. They could also check our website, but you need to know a lot more about what's on the hill and what our vision is. And the views, the monarch butterflies, you're getting the south and the southwestern side.
You do need to wrap it up.
Okay, well, I'd be just happy if they would give me an audience and so that I could convey some of these things.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Margot Cunningham, and I'm speaking as co-chair of Friends of Albany Hill. And I just want to say that I really like the trail improvements in the Oak Woodland. For the most part, I think it's a great idea, especially the Jackson to Taft section, making it so that it's not so steep because my husband cannot hike that section, and I think to have it more twisty is a really good idea. There's a couple of concerns. There are a lot of good, interesting, and somewhat rare native plants in the oak woodland, so I think when we're doing the work there, we need to be aware of that. We need to watch out for that when we're replacing the steps. That one switchback that, Bob, you mentioned, cutting it shorter instead of going through the Himalaya berry patch area, that concerns me because I don't really want to see cutting new trail through the oak forest there when there's already a trail, because there's some plants there native plants I wouldn't want to see disturb, the hazelnuts and some gooseberries. So that's one section that I don't support. I think it should go through the blackberries, which are not native, and we want to get rid of those anyway. So that's all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Francesco Papalia, an Albany resident, and I just yesterday went on a afternoon, beautiful Sunday ride from Key Route along the Greenway and then over on that West Street area that brought us out to the Ashby BART station and then down to the waterfront over by Berkeley Bowl West, and took 9th Street all the way back. And this was all on bikeways. I do not like biking on San Pablo Avenue or any of the main streets if I can avoid them. I love these off bikeways that are quiet and more casual. And the Adams Street continuation is a real something that would be really enhance the ability to make a nice travel from the north to the south. And also I wanted to think of it will now provide access, something like that, from people on the east side of Albany Hill who want to go over to Ranch 99 area. It's a lot easier to get there now. It'd be a nice way to get there. And then from people from the Richmond Annex who are going to go to the new Sprouts, that would be a way that they come. So we need to have a continuation of the bikeways on the west side of San Pablo Avenue. And the Adams Street one is the one that I think will work best, but we got to have at least one over there. So I hope you prioritize that one. Thank you.
Any other public comment? Yeah, we'll bring it back to council for final comments.
I just have a quick question. On Adams Street, people obviously like the idea of a bridge, but you say you have trouble meeting the Corps' standards for 100-year event floods or 0.01 exceedance probabilities. I spent a summer working for the Corps, so are they going to let you do it? They're pretty tough.
Yeah, I think there's other ways to get around it. Sometimes if there's no obvious way, the bridge is not an impediment. When that's really what they're trying to do, is make sure that new bridges are not creating a future flood hazard. So I've been involved with some projects where that's not been possible, and there are other ways that you can work around that. So it's not insurmountable. It does require some hydrology and hydraulics to really analyze the situation, and then some things that may come into effect. Could be things like how much water can actually get through the San Pablo culvert, because I'm sure that's less than the 100-year storm event. So that might be the number that the Corps would be willing to work with in terms of passage. So it's, again, it's part of a process that we've not had the opportunity to go down that road. And we've tried to account for that process and the time that it's going to take to kind of figure out a solution in that cost estimate. It could be a variety of different things to make it work, but the idea is that we do believe it's possible, and it would take some work with the Corps.
Are there any other council comments?
Just general ones. Thank you for the reports. Albany Hill has tons of potential, and it's been talked about in this city for years of how this is going to get improved, and I think this is an important first step. I would hope, I know that particularly the residents in Albany Hill have very strong opinions about how this should go, and I know you guys will be open to input from them as time goes on. Good luck. I think, the general thing that you're asking us is to say, yes, this seems to be the right path.
Yes.
I would agree.
Could I make a quick comment to just address this? Because I think there's a little confusion. Our project was simply to do a cost evaluation of these propositions. And unfortunately, we moved ahead and chose a material so we could add a cost to that. But these are not designs, and we're assuming this would all go through a public process. So it's unfortunate that obviously they look like designs because we had to design something so we could assign a cost to it. Right. Otherwise, it would have been so generic, the cost would have been way too low, and it may still be a little low, and then that wouldn't have done anybody any good. So, for instance, concrete, that's way down the road what you want to pave that with. We just use concrete for the cost estimate.
Yeah, I understand that part of it, and I'm hoping they're not, the costs that you've come up with are not way too low, but I know this will change as time goes on.
So is it the consensus of the council that we want to move forward in this very, very general direction? Other comments?
I just say, well, as opposed to what? I think everything sounds tremendous. I mean, these sound like great projects that very much need to be done. It sounds like they're in conformity with the plans and the visions that have been adopted by the city in the past. I would have some questions about, matching funding to projects, whether and leveraging, as I said, that there might be opportunities still to explore. But all of this certainly sounds very positive, and definitely, I don't think we have much choice but to move forward. We're running out of time.
Yeah, I have nothing to say to the contrary. Just a few comments. That this is very familiar to me since I was involved in the master plan when I was on Parks and Rec. Fixing existing access was a big part of that. It was a big thing that we heard from the public. So fixing the access at Madison in particular, which is very degraded, will be great. And just access in general is a really important thing, just to allow people to feel like they can safely access the site. That's going to be huge to to people's enjoyment and to enhancing this area. So that all looks great, including the bridge at it was not the Adams Street Bridge, but the other bridge over the creek. Belmont, yeah, the Belmont Bridge. I think that both that and the Madison Street entrance are both very important. Yeah, the concrete surfacing, well, I'm sure there'll be a lot of discussion about that, but hopefully we'll come out with something good. But I do, perhaps you did not mean, perhaps Councilmember Nason did not mean to bring this up, but in such a way, but I do, everything needs maintenance eventually, and so addressing the cost of the maintenance of the capital improvements, I think at some point it would be important to this process too, and if we're going to be choosing more funding streams down the road for ongoing maintenance for everything else, we ought to add that into the maintenance bucket so we can know how much funding we need to come up with. But it all looks good to me, and if if this process accidentally takes down a few more eucalyptus than it needs to, that's fine with me as well.
Okay, does that give you what you
Yes,
needed?
exactly.
Great. Okay, thank you all. And now we'll move into good of the city, which is the time for persons desiring to address the city council on an item that is not on the agenda. And please note, city policy limits each speaker to 3 minutes. The Brown Act limits council's ability to take and/or discuss items that are not on the agenda. Therefore, such items are normally referred to staff for comment or to a future agenda item, for future agenda. Do we have speaker cards?
Yes. Thank you.
We're about to.
Good evening, Mayor and council members. I've spoken before the group before. I'm a representative of AFFA regarding the rent mediation discussion. I spoke with my attorney and attorney for AFFA today, and he thought that I should point out, since it's very much been on my mind, that any consideration by the City Council for putting any kind of mediation or rent control into effect should consider, since you're interested in affordable housing and shared housing, that Costa-Hawkins does not protect single-family homes and condos from rent control. The courts have consistently ruled that renting a room in a single-family home or condo converts that property into a duplex, triplex, or whatever, depending on the number of rooms. Therefore, you are no longer exempted from rent control. This should be very concerning to any city council person, because ultimately it will destroy the ability of people to rent out their rooms. This also hurts diversity in the city. It damages elderly people's ability to rent out a room when they need the funds. Who did I speak with? I spoke with Clifford Freed. He wrote Costa-Hawkins in 1990. He's my attorney. He's an expert. He'd like to come here and discuss it with you. I'd like to also point out that that landlords and all property owners in Albany pay enormous property taxes, the second highest in California. Why do we pay such high property taxes? It goes directly to the schools. If you put rent control or mediation or anything that attempts to artificially control the prices of housing, you will completely destroy the schools in terms of the additional money needed for those schools. As the 5th largest landlord in Albany, which I am, I never pointed that out before. I speak to tenants all day long who express their complete understanding that they pay high rents because the landlords are paying high property taxes. And I am friends with all the other large owners in this city. We've talked at great length about donating perhaps $250,000 for a fund for the city to consider an affordable housing fee. And we've been told that's just been completely rejected. We are trying to get the City Council, along with the Social and Economic Justice Commission, to do some kind of housing study. Rents have leveled off. They're going down, and there has been no study of rents in the city from the Social and Economic Justice Commission. You will displace elderly people whose only source of income is their income from single-family home renting and from small apartment buildings. Most of the owners in Albany are not like me. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks. Francesco Papalia. I'm hoping that this is going to be the last time the City Council has go to the city at the end of the meeting. I'm not sure why it's not at the beginning. I think this is a disincentive for people to have to wait 2 hours just to be able to say their 3 minutes. So I hope that's a glitch that won't be repeated. It's happened once before, and I hope it's not going to happen again. Another issue that I want to bring up, though, is regarding and unintended consequences to the smoking ban we have here in Albany. There's a loophole in that regarding marijuana. And now, and I'm speaking now for the Albany property rights advocates, these apartment building owners are having a problem with people using marijuana, smoking it in the apartments. And as you know, as you may not know, it's not being contained inside the units. It's getting out into the halls. It goes out windows. They open the door, it goes out there. It's affecting the common areas where children traverse on a regular basis. And so I know you weren't intending that when you, but it's going to be more and more of a problem because of the legalization now of smoking marijuana and having and the use of it. Now, the group that I represent, we have no problem with the legalization. We have no problem with medical use. And anyone who needs it for medical use, there are many alternatives besides smoking it. So if you have a true medical condition, you should be able to get the same alleviation of your symptoms using oils or pills or some other method. Now, another really important thing that you want to be concerned about is that when people do smoke inside their units, often they disable the smoke detectors. And by doing that, they're creating a fire hazard. And, they don't want it to go off, so they disable it, and then do they hook it back up again, or do they just leave it off? So I'm not sure how to handle this, but I think it'd be something for the fire chief to look into, and for you to figure out a way to amend the smoking ordinance to create a proper way to address this problem. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, Amy Smollins again, Albany Strollers and Rollers. It's May, so May is Bike Month, and just want to let you guys know that Thursday, May 11th, is Bike to Work Day. So Albany Strollers and Rollers we'll have our Energizer station at our usual spot, Marin Avenue at the Greenway, somewhere in that intersection. We'll have snacks and beverages, and swag and good company and chit chat, and actually mechanics from three local bike shops will be there. Berkeley Bikes and Skateboards, Blue Heron, and Bikes on Solano. So if you need a safety check or something, come on down. It's from 7 to 9 a.m. And so ride on by on your way to work or wherever you go if you're retired. And also, if you want some good karma and a Blue Heron special coupon, we could use some more volunteers from 6:30 in the morning. Yeah. So you can email me or text me or Facebook message me or anything like that if you'd like to volunteer. It's a lot of fun. Thanks. Bye.
Thank you. All right. Seeing no one else, we'll bring it back to council. New business, 10-1, conceptual design of proposed park and ride lot on the south side of Buchanan between the I-80 and 580 freeway ramps. May we have a staff report?
Good evening, Mayor and council members. Aleda can give you a staff report, but I thought I would just check in to see, given the hour, whether you wanted a brief staff report from staff or whether you had wanted to go right into any of your comments.
This is our last item. I'm fine with a brief staff report, brief, underlined.
Very brief. Well,
Thank you, though.
know me. For those who don't, my name is Aleida Andrino Chavez with the City of Albany. Just to start, this is basically this is a coordination between the Metropolitan Transportation Commission, Caltrans, through the Commuter Parking Initiative. The MTC is allocating $3 million for the implementation of 3 park and ride lots on their freeway interchanges in the East Bay. One of the locations is Albany, Buchanan Street. And given the fact that it's only $3 million for 3 locations, MTC wants to actually create this pilot program and monitor after its implementation to increase the program throughout the Bay Area, the region, learn from it basically. So the design phase is going to be completed in 2017, and the implementation is slated for 2018 between summer and fall. The park and ride will have a user fee of daily fee for parking, and that's going to help defray the cost of operations and maintenance. That is something that we discussed during the I-80 Integrated Corridor Mobility project in 2009, between 2008 and 2009, and at the time there were some conceptual plans presented, but because of the operations and maintenance, the idea was dropped. So in December 2017, MTC staff and staff from AECOM, that is the project designers, met with us in Albany here and discussed the proposed idea. We had a presentation to the Traffic and Safety Commission in January 2017, provided comments about crosswalks, a fence, and the median. We then met on site with the project team and actually evaluated those requests from the Traffic and Safety Commission. We later we received an updated conceptual plan in April that we presented to the Traffic and Safety Commission and also received more comments. But at the time, staff had preliminary comments on, Thank you. Thank you. Okay. Staff had preliminary comments on the design, and what we did is that we would like to have, this is a staff report, but we would like to have a more direct connection between the alternate path and the proposed bus stop here. Also, we would like, in the crosshatch area, we would like to have a bulb out to decrease the turning speeds of vehicles, because even though we do have a beacon, a pedestrian beacon there, cars still turn at high speed, so a concrete bulb out would help a lot. The other request we had is to ask Caltrans, because this is a Caltrans right away, to ask Caltrans if we can have an on-demand leading pedestrian interval for the signals. So we have some, for pedestrians, we would have more an advantage crossing Buchanan in the off-ramp and on-ramp if they want to access the park and ride lot. I think those are the main comments that we had as staff. At the meeting last week, Traffic and Safety added comments to these and to the design, and we basically they were concerned about the limited amount of funds. They wonder if it's going to be enough for the 3 lots, and MTC has said that, as I said before, they want to implement the basic amenities, and as funding becomes available in the region, we will increase or implement more amenities like the electric vehicle charging stations, for instance. City staff has requested the conduits to be installed to prepare for future installation of the charging stations. But they want to monitor the use first and see how we can learn from it and implement additional features in the future. The other concern was Commissioner Del Rosario said that he sees AC Transit basically sees this as this lot would be a non-transit user because the Transpay Route L is almost at capacity when it reaches these bus stops. So the use of private shuttles wouldn't be considered a competition to public transit. So they're okay with that. And MTC has said before that this lot will be open to private shuttles because as part of the commuter parking initiative, they want to decrease congestion on the freeways and also on the Bay Bridge. The other comment is that about the height of the fence around the parking lot and also in the median. The commission requested a fence to prevent jaywalking here because it's unsafe and they anticipated some people will do it. So there is a fence that is about 10 feet height, and also around the parking lot is a fence that's about 10 feet height. Monitor carpool behavior also, it's another request, but since MTC is also monitoring after the implementation, that would be one of the behaviors that they're going to monitor, the user behavior and the carpool behavior as well, the carpool usage. And there's the last comment is that they want to make sure that there is enough space in the area where the carpool will be located, which is for the different users of the parking lot. The AC Transit also has requested or suggested that if there is an easy on, easy off bus stop, other Transbay routes could use the parking right lot if it's implemented with the design or arranged to be implemented, to be accommodated in the design. We have Michelle Go from MTC and Tyson Taino from ACOM to help answer the questions if you have some questions. Thank you. I hope it was not too long.
Perfect. Are there any questions from council?
Yes.
No.
I'm curious about the restrictions on parking that will apply to this lot. It does sound as if it's not a regular park and ride lot, since it will be, a fee will be charged. Will we be able, will people who want to access recreational uses on the weekends be able to use it when outside of the regular commute, if people want to use it to access the bike trail or to have a longer, now that we have 2-hour parking for the park, will people be able to park on Saturday and Sunday longer than for longer visits to the park?
That question was also raised at the Traffic and Safety Commission, but right now the plan is to close the parking lot overnight and also over the weekends. But Michelle, do you want to add to that?
Hi, Michelle Go, MTC. I think that's a question that's come up quite a bit when we spoke with city staff and as well as BCDC, the Bay Conservation Development Corporation. I think access to the shoreline and the park nearby is something of great interest. So I think that's something we would consider. It is something that could potentially have additional operating and maintenance costs for us. So I think we'd have to just weigh the costs of operating against the value, the additional desire to provide parking on the weekends.
Okay.
And demand.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Any other questions?
Yeah, so I'd like to clarify ownership of the project, the land, and of the maintenance. So it appears that MTC would fund the initial outlay of money to build it, and I heard MTC saying that they would operate it, but I also got some communication from staff that said MTC would be amenable to the city going after grant opportunities to improve it. So I'd like some clarification to who owns the land, who owns the projects, and who owns the ongoing maintenance. That's one question, and I'll let you answer that first.
Sure. Caltrans owns the land. We are entering into a maintenance agreement with them, which allows us to develop, operate, and maintain this as a park and ride lot.
Okay.
And so, right, maintenance would be our responsibility.
And it looks from the plans like there's going to be a booth for potential staffing. But have you decided whether or not you would definitely staff, or is that whether or not there'd be a person in the booth that would be for future consideration?
I think we are definitely considering staffing. It's just a matter of whether we'd have someone there full-time or whether we just have somebody during peak hours, peak commute hours. And that's a question also of, do we have enough revenue to cover the cost of some staff?
Okay. And I'll come back to this after public comment too, but also communication from staff indicated that charging stations won't be put in, but conduit will be laid, and the city of Albany could apply for grant money to have the charging stations put in. So that's not something MTC plans to do initially, at least, just so that my other council members are aware.
Are there other council questions? My only question is, I can't quite tell from this, is there designated spaces for disabled parking?
There is.
Is there any member of the public wishes to speak on this?
Hi, Amy Smolens, Albany Strollers and Rollers. Sometimes I work in the South Bay, and then I can commute. On occasion, I can carpool with someone who lives in Richmond, and so normally now I walk to the freeway off-ramp, and they'll pick me up. And this would be really convenient in that I could put my bike in one of the lockers, and get a lift there. He could meet me there, and I could go to work. Was concerned, because I work nights, that if I come back at midnight, that saying that it's going to be locked. I mean, there are people who work nights. Would it literally be locked and we'd be stranded? I would disagree with that concept, for one thing, for anyone, and myself, but for other people. I mean, people do work nights. And I'm just also not clear on what the bike route is from Buchanan and how we're supposed to get into the lot there. Can someone please, what's the thought?
That's, let me see. So that was one of our comments, to provide a more direct link between the alternate path and the bus stop and the crosswalk on the east side of this. It would be the west side of the intersection. In order to, if you want to use the alternate path, but also there is the use of the bridge. So this can be also another, if you want to do a separated right of way. If not,
How do we get across here, though?
There is a traffic signal there.
Oh, okay.
So, yeah. So, and then the request is to have a leading pedestrian interval at the signal.
Crosswalk and flashing lights or something, or?
Well, there is a traffic signal there. So, if Caltrans allows the leading pedestrian interval, you will have kind of your 7 to 10 seconds of pedestrian phase.
Okay.
Yeah.
Right.
I don't know what Caltrans would agree to.
Yeah, and coming back on bike from here to, if there's a safe way, from here to home at midnight is way safer and more comfortable than walking. So this would be terrific.
Yeah.
So,
there will be
and
illumination
appreciate the
too.
lockers.
Yeah.
So. Thanks.
Thank you. Okay, council, any more comments? Nick, I think you had something.
Yeah, just want to follow up on the electrical vehicle charging. So it's it's a little bit frustrating that this is a project that could reduce vehicle miles traveled and reduce greenhouse gases, but then the electric vehicle charging stations are optional, which is another feature that is relatively cheap in terms of being able to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. Now, there was an article about the Milpitas SPART station in the newspaper today or yesterday, which talked about the number of charging stations that they're going to be putting in or allowing for, and it's 10% of the parking is going to be available for electric vehicle charging stations, which matches the usage that we see in California of plug-in vehicles. It's just the purchasing and the usage is just going up like that every year. So 4 out of 201 is only 2%, and so at the very least, I would ask that the project accommodate 10% or 20 spaces that could possibly hold electrical vehicle charging stations. Conduit is nothing to lay. You can decide later if you want to put in charging stations in all the in all the spaces. But this is the future. The electric plug-in vehicle use is gaining hold.
Are there any other comments from council?
Yes. Do you have any specs on the electric? Is it going to be 220, 40 amp, or 80 amp? Has that been considered?
At this point, these are 35% plans, so we're going to develop the specs. But right now, there's a grant application going on for other locations. We're thinking of applying to the same venue, and it's through the Air District. And we will be working with Michelle and Tyson on the specifications. But yeah, at this point, we want to make sure that the conduit is there. And thank you for the comment about 10%. And we can consider, medium charge. I mean, we think that vehicles will be left there for 8 hours, so we don't really require the fast charge, but something a little bit like longer.
Thank you. Any other comments?
A question, would the bike lockers be part of the first phase, or would they? Okay. Great.
Yeah,
Wonderful.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And it's going to be the same type that BART uses, is that right, with the bike link?
Actually, one more quick question. Who are the anticipated customers? Is the conception that the majority of these spots will be taken by people who live within 5 or 10 miles, or is it people who are going to drive down from Vacaville and then take public transportation in? Do you guys have any background on that?
Well, that as another comment by the Traffic and Safety Commission, it seems that, right, we want to attract as many users, and we want this to be, I want to say MTC wants this to be, and we also want this to be successful. It's something that the Traffic and Safety Commission is very excited about. Yeah, there's consideration of people driving to the park and ride, and also private shuttles, like company shuttles. But MTC's vision, as long as they decrease the congestion on the freeway, on the Bay Bridge, that's the goal of the program. So, if you want to add.
I was just taking a look at a recent study in the past few years done by Soltrans for their park and ride lot in Vallejo, and they surveyed users, both people walking. They did an intercept survey, so it could have been casual carpoolers, people taking transit, and they found that 80% of the people came from Vallejo. So I think even in a more car-oriented area like Vallejo, most people will come from the surrounding neighborhood rather than drive in a long distance and try to park and use the facility. So I think you'll get a fair amount of users from Albany, but it is likely that you will have other users from neighboring cities.
So just a couple quick comments. I think the basic idea is great. I'm hoping this works out. I'm hoping you can start to consider the other side of Buchanan in terms of all that other space under the freeway that sits out there. If the initial concept works out, I would agree with Councilmember Pilch that it should have enough spaces that reflect the growing reality of electrically charged autos, and also enough space for bicycle parking, which I think is particularly going to be of a big interest in Albany. I've just always wondered ever since I've lived here that why, we have all this space underneath the freeways, and that's where you should park cars. So I look forward to this.
Okay, does that give staff what they needed?
Yes, we'll assemble your comments this evening along with traffic and safety and send that off to Michelle in the next day or two.
Great, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay, that brings us to other business announcements of events or future agenda items. Do we have anything there?
I'd just like to note that, we will be discussing marijuana, I'm sure, in the future agendas, and the point that one of the speakers made about smoking regulations, I think, was a very relevant one that we'll probably want to discuss those at the same time.
Okay, thank you. Then our next council meeting is Monday, May 15th, with no other things to say. Meeting is adjourned.
Thank you.
Thank you all.